obviously the demand constraints that have been imposed as a consequence of COVID-19. You also have, of course, too much supply on the market right now. But then in addition to that, you had the May futures contract expiring on Tuesday. And all of those factors together really led us to the negative prices that we saw. Obviously, oil markets are up again now. These are volatile markets right now as a consequence of the ongoing shutdown of the economy. So we don't make any future predictions on what price is going to be, but what we do know is that until we get through this demand shock as a result of COVID-19, we're not going to see any significant relief in the oil markets.
So as a practical matter, what do you need from the federal government? Because we did have President Trump say that he's asked his Secretary of Treasury and his Secretary of Energy to really come up with assistance for the U.S. oil industry. What would you hope to get?
Yeah, so, the most important thing that we need to keep in mind as we approach the federal government for assistance is, this industry has relied on free market principles for over 100 years. And we're not going to sacrifice those free market, free trade principles during this time of crisis. In fact, we would argue that during a time of crisis is the absolute worst time for us to try to re-engineer this system that has worked well for many, many years. So what we've asked from the federal government are a couple of different things. First of all, we need to make sure that companies have the liquidity that they need during this period of downturn so that they can come out the other side. And that will be done through the Fed facilities and through the Small Business Administration facility, the PPP program for smaller companies. So that's one area where the federal government can help and has already done some assistance to certain producers. Other things that they could do is we are going to hit a storage wall here pretty soon, probably at the end of April or early May, in terms of the available storage that is out there for oil that is not being refined. And we need to make sure that we have enough storage available. So the federal government has worked to open up portions of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve that can be used for storage. We need additional flexibility in that case as well so that we can store product that is being produced but not used because of the COVID-19 issue. The third thing that we just sent a letter today to the Department of Energy and to our USTR, the trade rep, talking about making sure that our trade allies and those that we have trade agreements with are meeting their obligations. So China, for example, when the China trade deal was signed at the end of last year, they had made certain commitments in terms of buying energy. We want to make sure that that energy is actually making it to China because that's another outlet for American energy, particularly for liquefied natural gas and crude.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting you, but is China well on its way back to consuming the oil that it was before? Where is it on the curve?
So we believe that China is on its way back up. Just to give you one anecdotal example, API has an office in Beijing. Our headquarters in Washington, D.C. is not reopened, but our Beijing office is. And that's an office that sells all of our certification products, our standards, to the Chinese market. And we absolutely believe that the Chinese market is back open for business, and we believe they'll be consuming American energy.
And does that give you some cause for hope, at least, that maybe the rest of us can start consuming oil again as we come back online?
There's no question. So we're also pleased to see that Germany looks like they're coming back online as well. They're a big consumer for liquefied natural gas also. And some states are starting to reopen. Of course, we would encourage states to follow public health guidelines here. We don't want to see a resurgence of the virus that are through it, of course. So we want to make sure that we're following all public health guidance. But until we get this economy back moving again, there's not going to be a huge upswing for the oil and gas industry.
Okay, Mike, I really appreciate you being with us. And once again, thank you for your patience. That's Mike Summers. He is the president and CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. And now we turn to Charlie Pellet for Market Check.
All right. I thank you very much, David Weston. Here's what's going on. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks resuming a push higher after briefly dipping into negative territory when a report said that a leading antiviral drug performed poorly in its first clinical test. The Financial Times reported that Gilead's potential antiviral drug for the coronavirus flopped in its first randomized clinical trial. Citing draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization, Gilead shares lower now by 6.3%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all holding on to gains. S&P's up 12. That's a gain of 0.5%. The Dow up 153, up 0.7. NASDAQ up 42. That is a gain of 0.6%. We've got the 10-year up 5/32. The yield right now 0.60%. Gold up 0.7%, 17.27 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 19%, 16.52 a barrel. Jobless claims soared again, pushing the total over the past 5 weeks to a record 26 million. And with more, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Last week's tally, 4.4 million claims, reflecting business shutdowns and stay-at-home orders. The economy is in a deep freeze. It feels like the Great Recession. The data look like the Great Depression, but it's a natural disaster, and mayors and governors are imposing restrictions on movement to prevent the death toll from soaring even higher. Again, 4.4 million jobless claims filed last week. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
Recapping S&P up 13, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. Let's turn back now to that big spending bill, $484 billion pending in front of the House of Representatives right now. Well, even before they have enacted that one, they already have a disagreement between the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader about what comes next, and specifically whether some help to the states may come along. Nancy Pelosi is saying we need a very significant bill to support the states. Mitch McConnell is saying maybe some states should just go bankrupt. Welcome now Rohit Kumar. He is PwC Leader of Tax Policy Services. Mr. Kumar earlier served as Majority Leader McConnell's Deputy Chief of Staff. So, Rohit, thank you so much for being with us today. Give us a sense of the feeling up on the Hill, as far as you know it, about the need to go forward with state assistance, because President Trump himself has said he thinks that is in the cards.
Yeah, so I think there are sort of two distinct issues, and it's easy to conflate the two. The one is sort of the general decline in revenues that everyone, businesses, states, localities, are all experiencing because of the shutdown in the economy. And then there's a separate sort of much long-standing issue about state pension plans and the degree to which they were underfunded even coming in to the crisis. So even after 10 years of economic growth, we had some states whose budgets were not in particularly good shape, and in large part, if not exclusively, because of sort of extensive public pension plan obligations. And so I think the issue here and the fundamental dispute, when you boil right down to it, is to what degree should the taxpayers sort of across the board be required to help pay for these pension obligations. Now, money being fungible, it's easy to say, well, we're just going to refill, for the lost revenue associated with the crisis. But are you indirectly sort of bailing out these pension plans? And this has been a long-standing concern. This is not something that showed up yesterday in the press. This is something that has been going on for a while. And my instinct, again, this is just my instinct, is that there is some sympathy for states that have been sort of battered by the economic crisis to the degree to which it is caused by the economic crisis, but there is perhaps less sympathy, certainly amongst Senate Republicans anyway, or the Majority Leader, if no one else, with respect to bailing out pension plans that were underfunded, severely underfunded in some cases, well before the crisis hit.
Rohit, isn't this a classic moral hazard? That is to say, how do you save the ones who really deserve help because they're in this situation through no fault of their own, without helping out the ones that, frankly, maybe had been not managing their balance sheet very effectively before?
Right. So that is exactly the concern, and that is exactly why I think what you heard the leader say yesterday, and has been described as sort of tapping the brakes on phase 4, because it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out how to do this in a surgical way that doesn't encourage additional moral hazard. And, one of the ways to think about it, and I think one of the things that's been suggested, is conditioning the funds on some sense of a plan to sort of to right the state of ship with respect to some of these funding obligations that, had been pre-existing pre-crisis. And but that's not something you're going to be able to do, in a week, and that's not something you're going to be able to do by unanimous consent. That's going to require a real negotiation. And this has been a long-standing problem, and maybe one very small silver lining out of this is if we could get that situation resolved and get those plans into a better condition as a part of a broader package, that would be a worthwhile thing to do if it can be done.
Rohit, let's turn to something that is exactly what you do now. You're head of tax policy services for PwC. How are we going to pay for all this? I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars here we're spending, and I think hardly anyone disagrees with spending it. We need to do it to try to save the economy. At the same time, at some point, don't we have to pay for it? Are we going to have to raise taxes? And I'm talking federal as well as state.
You know, that is a very good question, and one that is top of mind for a lot of people right now, which is exactly this, which is ultimately, do we have to pay for it? And if we do, how? I think there is increasingly people are... I think the assumption is eventually, yes, we will have to pay for it. But the question is eventually when. At what point does the sort of global supply of capital say to the U.S. economy, you know, we're going to demand a much higher interest rate than we're charging now in order to buy U.S. debt. Right now we're getting, you know, the cost of capital for the U.S. government is at sort of historic lows. And so we're able to finance this, deficit finance it for the moment. But, you know, when the music stops and there's not enough chairs available for everybody to sit on, what are we going to do? And candidly, and this is now just my view, is I'm not sure we can get there just on the backs of an income tax alone. You know, you're already hearing conversations here in Washington, D.C. about alternative revenue sources.
But is that wealth tax, which we heard about?
No, wealth tax is just another form of an income tax. I mean, it's an income tax by another name. So I'm talking now, people are thinking big picture, like, does the U.S. need to consider a value-added tax or some really, you know, out-of-the-box thinking, at least with respect to the United States, of course, and the rest of the world, taxes.
Hasn't the value-added tax been the great white whale that people have talked about, economists have for some time, because it really
you were right. It has. This is a conversation that comes up periodically. It's been around for ages, and so, you know, a lot of careers have lived and died on predicting that this will happen, and it has not yet happened. And you know, history has generally not been kind to governments that impose value-added taxes. And so, but the question becomes, if we're going to have to pay for this, what choices are available? Certainly, you know, there will be those that will propose some spending reductions. But, you know, I'm not sure we can get there without looking outside the box.
And a lot of economists have said the value-added tax is the way to go. Many thanks to Rohit Kumar of PwC. Always great to have you on, Rohit. Coming up, like most of the rest of the economy, housing starts are down. We're going to talk with Michael Bellman of the Associated Builders and Contractors about the state of his industry. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
There are two sides to every story. From the epic tales of love and loss comes the huge new steady rolling single. When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix. Download When the Judgment Comes, the Elise Rich remix, or stream wherever good music lives.
When the judgment comes.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Gilead Sciences shares are plunging after a report that its experimental drug being tested in COVID-19 patients failed to show a positive result in a Chinese trial. The drug company and a scientist involved in the trial dispute that characterization, however. According to reports from the Financial Times and Stat, the drug called remdesivir did not make a significant difference in the amount of time it It took patients to improve or their likelihood of death. Shares of Gilead down now by 5.9%. Stocks are holding on to gains. S&P up 7, a gain of 0.3%. The Dow up 100, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 21, that is a gain of 0.3%. 10-year up 5/30 seconds with a yield of 0.60%. Gold up 0.7%, 17.25 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude surging 20% now at $16.50 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That, David Weston, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie. From New York, this is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Housing and housing construction have long been part of the life's blood of the American economy. And like the rest of the economy, it's struggling in the face of the coronavirus crisis. To tell us about how the industry is faring, we welcome now Michael Belloman. He's president and CEO of Association Builders and Contractors. So welcome, Michael. It's really good to have you with us. Give us a sense of how the construction industry is doing right now. How much of it's shut down? How much of it actually is still going forward?
David, hey, thanks a lot for having me on. So Associated Builders and Contractors represent about 21,000 companies, and we focus in commercial construction, industrial construction, high-rise, residential, multifamily. We were on a path to record spends this year of $1.3 trillion plus construction spend across the country. Obviously, that's not happening. The impacts are kind of all over the board, and they're highly variable, David. So if you think about our industrial markets, they're not only impacted by the virus, but they're also impacted by the price of oil. So, refinery, construction, retrofit turnarounds are significant, significantly impacted. Obviously, in the retail sector, hospitality sector, those types of things are being hit. Urban areas that have been affected by executive orders, states that have been hit by executive orders have been shut down. However, there are markets, anything with the food industry, any kind of electrical infrastructure, water infrastructure, any kind of thing that's essential to keeping the country going, is proceeding along fairly well.
Everyone in the country wants us to get going again. At the same time, everyone's concerned about being cautious and careful and prudent about it. As you talk with authorities, federal and state authorities, about how to bring the economy back online, where does construction sit in the queue, as it were? I mean, what's the thinking? Because right now we're seeing, for example, in Georgia, they said, okay, let's try hair salons, let's try bowling alleys, let's try some gyms, things like that. Where does construction come in terms of life's blood for the economy on the one hand, and on the other hand, safety?
Well, first of all, in our industry, our first priority is to deliver all of our work safely. We have very specific project safety plans. We have very specific pre-task plans. We go through that process on a daily basis. We're always dealing with risks when it comes to construction safety. So now with this particular pandemic, we have CDC guidelines that give us very clear instructions. And what we do is we put in place safety methods to deal with that type of, event and those types of issues. Some projects are a little bit easier to comply with those guidelines than others. And so we have to put in those modifications. Construction is ongoing in many areas and in many markets. In some markets where we just can't deliver it safely, it's been shut down until we can actually deliver it safely. But we have been working with authorities. It's been a very collaborative effort around what are the protocols, what are the guidelines, what do we need to make sure we do so that we can deliver the work safely.
We've had $349 billion distributed already to small and medium-sized enterprises. We've got another big chunk of cash, something like $370 billion more, that the House should be approving perhaps as early as today. How much of that gets distributed to the construction industry? Because some of us might tend to think of construction companies as being really big companies. Not all of them are.
David, you're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, 98% of construction companies, according to the 2015 business census, employ less than 100 people. And those companies employ 71% of the workforce. So our construction companies in our industry, 14% make up the slice of the pie on the first tranche of the payment protection plan. So these have been really critical to our small member, our small business construction industry. And this next tranche is very important as well.
What about infrastructure? Because one of the things that we're talking about now is how we try to get the economy going again. We have Republicans and Democrats agreeing apparently we need infrastructure, although they've done that before and haven't quite gotten there. Where does that sit?
Well, they are having conversations about it, and I think that the conversations are also about what is infrastructure. I think in this moment in time, we need to also start thinking about other parts of our infrastructure, and I think of the internet infrastructure. I think about rural broadband, for example, with remote schooling. I have friends that have kids that live in rural areas that don't have access to broadband and can't do e-learning. So I think infrastructure around the internet, I think data storage, all the data centers, I think cybersecurity infrastructure is critical. Also, let's take a look at the infrastructure that's really critical to us, food industry, water infrastructure. Also, let's take a look at the manufacturing infrastructure with regards to supply chain around our national security items and just personal protective equipment. And, of course, infrastructure when it comes to pharmaceutical and biotechnology, research and manufacturing, so that we can become more dependent, self-dependent on these critical supplies, so that should something like this ever happen again from a national security perspective, that infrastructure is in place. So I think if we look at it with that, in addition to the bridge safety and some of the other items that, we all have the inventory of the list, hopefully this will coalesce a much more higher sense of urgency to get it done.
Urgency, but also discernment, because one of the issues here is we all recognize we need the infrastructure. The things you described are needed. In fact, one of the things we've talked about on this program is the spotlight that has been put on the need for remote learning, whether it's in urban areas or rural areas for broadband. At the same time, there tends to be, in the past at least, has been the opportunity for politicians to sort of really have a lot of different decorations on the Christmas tree.
Yeah. I think it's two fundamental decisions that need to be coming. We need to come around, and that is one: how do we pick the projects and who picks the projects? That often seems to be a little bit of a different perspective, and then how the projects are funded. So those are the two main themes. I think if we can rally around these type of critical infrastructure points, this time hopefully we can come to an agreement.
What about the question about who gets to pick? That's a really good point. For your experience, is that better at the federal level, the state level, the local level? Who is in the best position to decide?
Well, I think it's actually more of a criteria question, and I really liked what the president rolled out in March of 2018 around his guidelines around infrastructure, and put some value-oriented criteria around what got funded in terms of the projects. What created the most value to the citizens of the United States of America? And if we can start thinking about it in that terms, I think then collectively, I don't care who picks, if we have the right criteria in play.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. It really was very helpful to have you with us today. That's Michael Bellerman of Associated Builders and Contractors. So that does it for today. A very eventful day. We're still waiting for Congress to approve that $484 billion spending package. We lost another 4.4 million jobs with jobless claims that came out. In the meantime, Gilead is having quite a time with that remdesivir, which apparently did not measure up in tests to treat COVID virus. That does it for Balance of Power for today on Bloomberg Radio. I'm David Weston. Thank you for joining us.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information?
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they built around. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates. Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, my watch is going off. That means it's time for another edition of Bloomberg Business Week, live from New York and New Jersey, streaming on YouTube. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Thursday, April 23rd, 2020. Carol Messer along with Jason Kelly. And we were talking on a prep call, Jason, the markets are kind of bouncing around. We've had a lot of news flow, and I feel like it's been another tough day of highs and lows when it comes to economies, markets, and, of course, the virus.
Absolutely. And we've got more governors talking. We've got the federal government talking. The president yesterday maybe changing his tune a little bit. It's all going to come down to testing and tracing and treatment. A lot of news along those fronts today. We're going to get into it all. I do have a question to ask you. So when your watch goes off, you go, oh, my gosh, I have to do a show.
That's exactly what happens.
Is that what happens every day?
It's the last reminder to get my butt into the seat,
all right.
Is basically. All right, everybody, lots to cover over the next few hours. Let's get a check, though, on today's trading day. Let's bring in Charlie Pellet. Hi, Charlie.
Hello there, and happy Thursday. Got to begin with Gilead. Shares down now by 5.8%. No doubt a story we will be talking about a lot today. Stocks erased most of their gains after a report said that a leading antiviral drug performed poorly in its first clinical test. S&P 500 index little changed after rising as much as 1.6%. NASDAQ turned negative. Gilead's potential antiviral drug for the coronavirus flopped in its first randomized clinical trial. This according to the Financial Times, citing draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization. Gilead shares, again, they are trading lower now by 6%. NASDAQ down by half a point right now. The S&P up 2 points. The Dow is higher by 90. That is a gain of 0.4%. Best level of the day, by the way. The Dow have been up 409 points, up 1.7%. Gold up 0.5% right now, 17.23 the ounce. The 10-year, the yield there, 0.60%, up 430 seconds. Crude, a major story as well today, surging 22%. West Texas Intermediate now at 16.88 a barrel. So again, recapping, Gilead down 5.7%. S&P up 5, a gain of 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and as is the course of business here on Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to have a parade of leaders, a veritable parade of folks to explain what's going on here across the worlds of finance, industry, industrial materials, and tech. We're going to talk with the CEOs of State Street, Slack, and Commercial Metals. Carol?
I call it one-stop shopping for all the news you need to know on business and markets and certainly the virus. All right, so we're going to talk with, as you said, a bunch of CEOs, State Street, Slack, Commercial Metals. We've also got a well-known individual, certainly to our audience, longtime business and financial journalist, Joe Nocera. He's part of our Bloomberg News team. He writes a column, and he really is just wonderful, Jason. We're big fans. But just putting together politics, Fed policy, markets, business news, and certainly what's going on in the virus, just putting it all together, making sense out of it.
Also, not a shy man in terms of giving his opinion. If you've ever read anything he's done or heard him on this program or listened to his podcast, you know that. All right, couple of non-shy guys as well are going to help us set the Business Week agenda. Michael McKee is international economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg, joining us on the phone from New York City. Dave Wilson, he is in New Jersey on our access line there, broadcasting from home as we all are, or as most of us are, I should say, stocks editor, author of the chart and stock of the day. Mike, I want to start with you because that jobs number, the jobless claims number, I should say, sort of amazing to think about. And I feel like we said something similar last week, this notion of millions and millions of claims. And the market, at least initially, the equity markets at least said, okay, got it.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking to think about. A month ago, we were talking about 216,000 jobless claims, and now we're talking about 4.4 million, and the market thinks that's reasonably good news. Yeah. It just shows you how fast and how horrible the deterioration in the labor market has been. We've had a couple of weeks of 7 million jobless claims, so 4.4 doesn't sound all that bad, but what it translates to is about 26.5 million jobs wiped out in the last month, and that could equal, when we get the April payrolls report on May 8th, that could equal about a 23% unemployment rate. 1933, 24.9% was the high of the Great Depression.
So Mike, that's just, blow your mind number. And, I heard you earlier on Bloomberg Radio, talking about, and it might have been with David Weston or somebody else from our Bloomberg Radio team, but how do we model the economy or even world economies on the data that we have today when we really don't have the models on this?
Yeah, that's the problem, Carol. We don't have good data from the Depression, and that's the only thing that's remotely close to this in terms of the impact. And so it's very hard for anyone to say with any precision, other than adding up the jobs lost for a jobless for an unemployment rate number, with any precision what this means for the economy. People are making their best guesses by looking at sectors and how many people are unemployed and how many businesses might be closed. But at this point, there's no comparable historical data to really create a model.
So, Dave Wilson, come on in here because obviously we talked about the equity trade overall. We've also got, we've been talking about parades already, the continuing parade of earnings. What are we hearing maybe from some individual names that gives us a sense of what's happening among companies?
Well, one thing you can point to is what's happening with the railroads. And you talk about an industry group that's tied in intimately to the U.S. economy, that would be it. There were numbers out of CSX yesterday that went over well. The shares are higher. And Union Pacific came out today, and those numbers even better. And now they're talking about a 25% drop in carloads this quarter, but they figure they have the cash to get through it, something like $2 billion. And they won't even need to borrow money, as a whole lot of other companies have done, just to sustain their business. So Union Pacific shares up about 4%. So, you take numbers like that and you see why it is that really, if you look at today's trading, it's like the more economically sensitive areas of the market are leading the way, which may seem kind of strange. Industrial companies, great example. Union Pacific, now the most heavily weighted company in the S&P 500 Industrial Index, a big part of that. And then you have energy stocks. As crude oil kind of comes off its lows, turns positive and keeps rising after what we saw on Monday with those negative prices in the oil markets. The energy shares are coming back.
Hey, Michael McKee, got one question for you. I know we've got another stimulus package making its way through the House, and we expect it to get to the president's desk. Should we anticipate there's going to be even more to kind of help out this economy?
Yes, Nancy Pelosi's already said that the House Democrats at least, has started work on a phase 4. I guess people are calling today's bill phase 3.5. They want to add more money. You got the checks, the first time. They want to add another round of that at least. They want to add money for the states, Mitch McConnell notwithstanding, and they want additional money for small businesses. So, yes, there's going to be a phase 4. There'll probably even be some sort of phase 5 at some point. The president talking about an infrastructure bill that may not get off the ground this year, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at to try to rebuild the economy once the virus lets us reopen.
Dave, final word to you. What else are you looking for in the trade today, as it feels like this is a market trying to make sense of itself?
Well, it does. And the real question is whether what we're seeing in terms of the more economically sensitive areas is sort of a one-day phenomenon, or whether there's more to come. And we're going to have a lot more earnings to get through to figure that out, notably Intel after the close of trading today.
Good tease ahead. We will be covering that in real time. We'll also check in with you later, Dave, for your chart and stock of the day. Our thanks to Dave Wilson, as well as Michael McKee, international economics and policy correspondent for Bloomberg. A very busy day for him, we know, with those jobless claims. Carol.
Absolutely. Let's get the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day. It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, Jason, is $85 million. Monday's unprecedented collapse below zero in oil cost Bank of China customers $85 million. Hundreds of angry retail investors apparently flooding onto the internet to protest against the lender after their investments in products linked to West Texas Intermediate crude were wiped out. That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And I don't think we've seen the last of the oil story and the economic aftermath of that, both financial as well as just, how it affects industries, how it affects municipalities, states, and countries. In the meantime, let's get over to Bob Moon. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, it appears likely there are a lot more coronavirus cases than the numbers show. That's based on new data in the nation's virus epicenter, New York. Of the 3,000 people randomly tested, Governor Andrew Cuomo says more than 13% were positive for coronavirus antibodies in the state.
13% of the population is about 2.7 million people who have been infected. If you look at what we have now as a death total, which is 15,500, that would be about 0.5% death rate.
Cuomo says the percentage ends up being higher in New York City, where 1 in 5 tested positive for the antibodies needed to fight the infection, suggesting the number of people with coronavirus is far higher than the 250,000 confirmed cases. With occasional charges of partisan politics, members of both parties in the House of Representatives voiced their support of the latest spending bill to deal with the coronavirus crisis. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
Democrats pointed to the provisions they succeeded in adding to the bill. James Clyburn.
To know the full extent of how this virus is ravaging communities of color, we must test. There's $25 billion for testing.
Ranking Republican Kevin Brady.
The battle continues. Amid signs that in some regions we are flattening the curve and beginning to reopen economies safely as health conditions on the ground permit.
The Democratic-led House is also creating a special committee to keep tabs on all the spending. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
With the medical crisis, can any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect his home and family from disaster, Steve used courage, wisdom, and his camera phone.
That should do it.
Way to go, Steve! By simply taking digital pictures of his family's important documents, Steve can always have them stored safely online, no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
What What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in...
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
on the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike. Just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelletin. Up Thursday with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. We are well off session highs, though, after a report said that a leading antiviral drug performed poorly in its first clinical test. S&P 500 index right now is up by 0.3%, have been up as much as 1.6%. Gilead's potential antiviral drug for the coronavirus flopped in its first randomized clinical trial, according to the Financial Times, citing draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization. Gilead shares down now by 4.1%. S&P up 8, that's a gain of 0.3. The Dow up 133, up 0.6. NASDAQ up 20, that is a gain of 0.2%. The 10-year up 6/32 with a yield of 0.59%. Gold up 0.8%, 17.26 the ounce. Crude surging 17% right now. West Texas Intermediate at 16.29 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, testing, tracing, they are at the core of everything that happens going forward. We hear about it from the president. We hear about it from experts on the coronavirus task force, from governors, from mayors, etc. Let's talk to someone who is working on this on the front lines on a national level. Anita Cicero is Deputy Director of Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. It's part of the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. As you might tell by the name, the Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Mike Bloomberg. He's the founder of Bloomberg LP, Bloomberg Philanthropies, parent company of this radio station. Anita, so good to talk to you.
Good to be here, Jason.
So what you're doing, as I said, is just really at the crux of all of this. This is going to determine what happens next. Where are we when it comes to really rolling out a plan to find cases and to trace folks?
Well, we do need a national plan for that. And so far, there has not been one. CDC has provided some useful guidance and talked about the role of contact tracing in fighting the pandemic. But we developed our own report on testing and contact tracing because we really feel that that is the thing that's going to make the difference in this outbreak. And for contact tracing, it just involves finding out who an infected person came in contact with so that those individuals can be alerted and also quarantined in order to monitor their health and to make sure that they don't continue spreading the virus in public. So this is critically important at this juncture, especially if we're going to be lifting social distancing.
I got to say, Anita, every morning I wake up, I throw on Google and I say, give me the top news headlines. And I hear about what's going on around the country in terms of starting these efforts to get control of the virus. Tell me how a testing and tracing system will work. What's the money needed to implement it? What are the people needed to implement it? And what does someone like me at home or Jason at home, what do we need to know about it? And what will we ultimately need to do to make this work?
All very good questions. So contact tracing is something it's really a traditional, old, tried and true method of being able to trace the spread of infection and to control the infection so that it's not spread further. And public health agencies across the U.S. have been doing this for years. They do it to track measles cases, tuberculosis, sexually transmitted infections. So this is something that our state and local public health agencies know how to do. Now, that being said, they are understaffed and underfunded. I think public health budgets in the past 15 years have been cut by 30%. Most public health agencies in the United States before COVID did not have staff that were dedicated full-time to contact tracing. This is one of the many, many things that public health does in the course of their jobs. And so what is really needed is to have funding that will go to the state public health departments and local public health departments so that they can do a couple things. One is really to hire a significant number of workers or use volunteers and train them so that they can assist with contact tracing methods, and also to maybe make use of some new technologies that may be coming online soon that can assist with contact tracing. And in terms of what what's important to know about this is that, we are all very, desperate to get back to life as maybe not completely normal, but more normal than we're living through right now with these strict social distancing requirements. And the key to being able to circulate again in public is for the United States to know where all of its COVID cases are. So to use the testing in order to identify all those cases, and then also be able to contact people who could have been exposed to a confirmed case to make sure that they quarantine for 14 days and stay out of circulation. Once we're able to do that, then, and we know more or less where the cases are, then others who are not infected and who weren't exposed will be more able to go to work and go to more, shops and again, it will be a while before things are completely back to normal, but at least that it would allow social distancing measures to be relaxed. So it is really important in order to try to get this right.
So, Anita, and we're going to continue our conversation in just a few minutes, but in about a minute, tell us, collaboration and coordination seems really important. How confident are you that we can do this between the federal and state and local levels?
Well, again, we need funding. I really have a lot of confidence in state and local public health officials to be able to, if given the resources, to be able to manage these programs. And we can talk more about it, but the training that's required, it's not that extensive or that complicated. So this is something that can be done. It's not a moonshot. It's just the funding needs to be there to hire the workforce.
It's a money question more than anything, it sounds like. All right, we're going to continue this conversation. Anita Cicero is the Deputy Director of Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. It's part of the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. Of course, as you can tell by the name, probably the Bloomberg School is supported by Mike Bloomberg. He is the founder of Bloomberg Philanthropies and Bloomberg LP, the parent of this radio station. Carol?
Looking forward to continuing our conversation. And then, of course, we're going to get into more of the market activity today. Stick around, though. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm Carol Masser, along with Jason Kelly.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street's gains are fading after a leading antiviral drug reportedly flopped in its first clinical test against COVID-19. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 78, the S&P 500 up 2 points, the Nasdaq Composite is up 3. The drug in the failed test was Gilead Sciences' Remdesivir. The Financial Times said the drug failed to improve patients' conditions or reduce the presence of the coronavirus in their bloodstream. Gilead is down nearly 6%. Instacart has the welcome mat out for almost anyone who wants to pick and deliver groceries. It surpassed its goal of adding 300,000 workers in March. It now wants to add 250,000 more. Germaphobes fearful of taking public transit are giving car makers a glimmer of hope. Cars.com says 20% of people searching for a car on its site said they don't currently own one and had been using public transit or ride-hailing. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in...
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they built around. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 2005, University of Utah quarterback Alex Smith, his first-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers.
With the first selection in the 2005 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Alex Smith, quarterback, Utah.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Did you know with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations in smooth streaming quality and discover local news, talk, and music stations you didn't even know existed. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's Classic Game Replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
The 2020 NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
With the New York Jets, that's going to be the hot spot for this draft early on, right? We're going to see if a team's going to try and get up into that spot and see if they want to...
Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, TuneIn has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every Round 1 selection.
Oliver is the only guy in this draft that has Aaron Donald potential. Who's going to get up and take it?
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home and when your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come. Search NFL Draft to listen.
Live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to continue our conversation with Anita Cicero. My apologies for mispronouncing her name before. Down at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, interested to extend this conversation, figure out what else is happening when it comes to tracing and where we are with the virus, Carol.
Yeah, and I want to ask her about the vaccine because she understands the policy and the regulatory framework of that as well. All right, let's get another check on your top business stories and an update on the trading day. Here is once again Charlie Taylor.
All right, thank you very much, Carol Master. Here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ, they're all higher right now. 14-point gain in the S&P 500 index, up 0.5%. Stocks, however, did erase most of their gains after a report said that a leading antiviral drug performed performed poorly in its first clinical test. S&P 500 index have been up as much as 1.6%, up now by 0.5%. The Dow had been up more than 400 points, up now by 174, up 0.8%. NASDAQ up 45, that is a gain of 0.5%. Gold up 0.8 now at $17.28 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 21%, $16.64 a barrel on WTI. Gilead's potential antiviral drug for the coronavirus flopped in its first randomized clinical trial. This according to the Financial Times, citing draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization. Gilead shares now lower by 3.2%. One of the big unknowns with the global pandemic is the timeline for getting a vaccine. Dr. Jason Farley is a professor of nursing at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and on Bloomberg Television this morning, he told us it'll be most likely 12 to 18 months away.
Right now, the vaccine studies are looking at what we call phase 1 vaccine studies. These types of studies are really looking at the safety and whether or not we actually see a response. So does the immune system respond to the vaccine?
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Equinor has become the first major oil company to cut its dividend amid a historic market rout. The move by Norway's biggest crude producer may be a signal of what's to come from others in the industry. Next week, by the way, we will be hearing from Royal Dutch Shell and Chevron. Today, among some of those oil stocks, Equinor down 0.4%, ExxonMobil higher by 3.8%, Chevron up 3.6%, ConocoPhillips up by 4.4%. Recapping, S&P up 14, a gain now of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. Appreciate the update. Still with us is Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health, joining us from Washington, D.C. Anita, one thing I did want to get from you, because you folks at Johns Hopkins have just been incredible in terms of keeping track of the virus and really giving a good indication and perspective on where we are, where we're going, where we need to be going based on, the actions of everybody around the country. You're a lawyer. You've worked in Washington. You understand pharmaceuticals, the regulatory framework, the policy framework. What do you think is realistic in terms of us actually getting a vaccine that can tackle this virus?
Well, that's the $1 million question right there. And the good news is that I think governments and international organizations and industry are all focused on that goal and working very hard, contributing a lot of funding for that. I think that in our country, FDA has shown some flexibility in terms of regulatory issues surrounding development of vaccine. But the fact is that it's really critical to have randomized controlled trials to prove the efficacy and also safety of vaccines that come online. And to do that well, it does take some time. So I think it's going to require some patience. I'm optimistic that we will get there ultimately, but it's unlikely to be right around the corner.
But this year or next year?
I would not place my bets that it will happen this year.
Yeah.
Okay. But, one can hope.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and certainly, some of the treatment on the treatment side and the therapeutic side, obviously, some not great news today from Gilead. Meanwhile, closer to home here in New York, we got some data that it feels like, at least is being interpreted as somewhat positive in the sense of the spread and the number of people who have developed antibodies here. Anita, what does that tell us, and how does that figure into this tracing project that you're working on nationally? When you see figures like that coming out of New York and New York City, especially where upwards of 20% of people have been exposed or actually have had the virus and now have the antibodies, help us understand how this all fits together.
Well, the testing and contact tracing, in addition to antibody testing, which is called serology testing, are all part of a disease surveillance system, and they would all have a role to play. I think there's a lot of hope that eventually there'll be enough cases in a particular population to say, oh, now we have herd immunity, meaning enough people have been exposed that they're less likely to continue to be infected. But even though there are some encouraging signs from different places based on serology testing, there's no community that is close to herd immunity. I think that in terms of the antibody test too, because there were some relaxed regulatory requirements and to try to get tests out as soon as possible, it's sort of a mixed bag now. So some have shown to have some, sensitivity issues and problems, and so I think that FDA is sort of reining that back in a bit and making sure that serology testing that is available is, known to be reliable, to determine the antibodies, and then more work needs to be done really to confirm that the presence of antibodies confers immunity for people and how long that immunity lasts.
Hey, one thing we wanted to ask you, just got 30 seconds here. The hardest hit area, New York, they're finding that over 21% of the people tested positive for a blood marker that they had been infected at some point with the virus. Just again, about 25 seconds. What's important about that we need to know, just quickly?
Well, it could be that those people, therefore, have the antibodies and would not be reinfected with COVID anytime, and for months at least. But also, potentially, they could participate and donate plasma for other patients who need it in order to help build their antibodies up to protect against the disease.
All right.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Great contacts. Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Obviously, the Bloomberg School of Public Health supported by Mike Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP. Let's get to Bob Moon now for world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, House lawmakers are debating another stimulus bill that aims to help those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. More than 26 million people have filed for unemployment assistance in the time since many social distancing orders have been enacted nationwide. And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is pointing fingers, claiming on the House floor that partisan politics played a role in delaying the legislation.
Yes, some people, unfortunately, got laid off because it was delayed. It wasn't a bright moment for this body that week.
Pressure continues to mount to get the economy restarted. New Jersey's Democratic Governor Phil Murphy, during his briefing today, said officials are seeing a slowing of the rate of spread of the virus, though he announced 307 additional deaths in his state, which makes him question how soon things can go back to normal.
I am not, and we're not in a position yet to begin reopening our state and jump-starting our economy. I still think that's weeks away.
President Trump has made himself the daily spokesman for the nation's coronavirus response, yet few Americans regularly look to or trust Trump as a source of information on the pandemic, according to a new survey from the Associated Press NORC's Center for Public Affairs Research. Just 28% of Americans say they're regularly getting information from Trump about the coronavirus, while as many do so on occasion. Only about half of Republicans say they have a lot of trust in Trump's information on the pandemic. Still, 23% say they have high levels of trust in what the president is telling the public. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In-depth analysis, concise.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip 3, have a game night. In fact, why not make it a game day? Whether you're quarantined with kids or roommates, nothing passes the time like a game of cards, Pictionary, charades, dominoes, or Never Have I Ever. If you've got the hardware, break out the video game console and enjoy hours of guilt-free gaming. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab. In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Behind the highlight reels, championship rings, and colossal paychecks, there are sports stories that fuel, deepen, and even challenge our love for the game. For true tales of underdogs, anti-heroes, and game-changing innovators, search sports documentaries on the TuneIn app.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
Round the Bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks resuming a push higher after briefly dipping into negative territory when a report said that a leading experimental coronavirus drug made by Gilead performed poorly in a test. Gilead shares down now by 3.3%. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all showing green on my screen, with the S&P up now by 12 points. That's a gain of 0.5%. NASDAQ up 43, also up 0.5%. The Dow up 172 points, up 0.7%. The 10-year up 5/32 yield, 0.60%. Gold up 0.9, $17.29 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude at $17 a barrel right now, up $3.25, higher by 23.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. And, Carol, when we map out our show, there's some moments that I look forward to just as a way to sit back, sort of rest into the show, and just talk to a really smart person.
And I know who that is.
This is that moment.
Joe
Nocera. Love Joe Nocera. One of my favorite folks. Been reading his stuff for years and now listening to the dulcet sound of his voice.
Joe, we're buttering you up because we really mean it.
I'm telling you. I
really
feel like
mean it.
you guys just want to take a rest and let me talk for the next 10 minutes, huh?
No, we really mean it.
We would do that. I was gonna pump up your podcast a little bit. The Shrink Next Door. It's perfect quarantine listening if you're like one of the 3 people in America who hasn't already listened to it. But we find you in Southampton, safe and sound, I hope. And also,
wait, what's it like out there? Can we ask you what's it like out there?
Well, let me just put it this way: lawn maintenance is an essential activity. I mean,
you're working in the yard a lot.
No. What I'm saying is, people are the workers in the lawn business are just going crazy out here. It's kind of unbelievable, really. I mean, in most other ways, we're like everybody else. Everybody's wearing a mask. You can't go into certain stores. There's a ton of takeout because, there's so many New Yorkers out here. They're so used to takeout that all the restaurants are actually doing a pretty good business with takeout pizza, takeout pasta, takeout steaks, takeout everything. But it's quiet. It's definitely quiet.
All right. So one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you today, and again, we love talking to you anytime, but I mean, you've had some pretty provocative, as you tend to, columns sort of taking stock of where we are at this moment, especially when it comes to the rescue that is underway from the corporate side. You've written a number of books about this. You understand the financial system really well and the corporate world. What do you make of it so far? Because you've been a critic, I think it's fair to say, of how this is going.
Well, I mean, the first thing is the right way to do this, honestly, is to put money in the hands of the people rather than trying to run it through a bank and a business. That's a crazy way to do it. And, they're always in this situation now where they're just going to keep shoveling money to banks. They're going to keep shoveling to businesses, and it's in a first come first serve. So people are saying, well, the big companies got it first, and that's so unfair. The big companies are organized. They know how to do this. They know how to get in the door. The little guy, the corner pizza joint, he needs help, and they're not going to get that help from the federal government. So I just think that proceeding the way we are is the wrong way to proceed. Let me just say one other quick thing. I'm so tired of being jealous of Germany, but they've done this so right. They've given every citizen a stipend for 4 or 5 months, and that's the way they're keeping their economy and their country going.
So do you think there's any appetite to do that here, or is the horse out of the barn?
No, the horse is out of the barn, and it's just something that America is ideologically, America has a hard time with that.
Yeah.
At least on the right, especially on the right. And I just don't think we're going to go that way, even though it's obviously the most sensible way to do this.
Yeah, but how do we break the system, Joe? I mean, it's the big companies that listen, or that lawmakers listen to. I mean, they're the ones that have, the direct path to Washington.
Well, I don't blame this on the big companies. I mean, the big companies, first of all, the IBMs, the Xeroxes, the HPs, they're going to be fine. They're going to survive. They got money in the bank. They're all trying to keep their employees on the payroll as much as they can.
Mm-hmm.
The issue really is the small businesses, the corner stores. I'm terrified that when we come out of this, 50% of the small businesses in America are going to be gone. Yeah. And that's the tragedy to be worried about.
So, Joe, shifting gears a little bit, maybe dramatically, I want to talk a little bit about sports because it's something you've written a lot about, and specifically the NCAA. What does the notion of, and it feels more and more likely that we will not have certainly the measure of college sports and college football and everything else that we're used to come this fall. What are the implications of that for the business of sports and for the business of the NCAA and this model that you and others have essentially said is, speaking of fundamentally broken?
Right. I don't think there's going to be college football this year. The athletic directors, they got on the phone with Pence a couple of weeks ago. He wanted to talk to them, and they basically said, look, if we don't have students on campus, we're not going to have football, period, right. End of story, no matter how much you may want it. The financial implications of that are huge. Football is by far it's a $2 or $3 billion enterprise. And then basketball is $1 billion enterprise for the NCAA. That's where they get most of their money. And if you can't televise college football, it's going to be devastating to the world of college football. And I think I think it could wind up meaning that there's a huge ratcheting back of what football is, what it means, what it will do for the society. I think it'll be much, much harder for coaches to justify $11 million a year in salary. And it's going to also mean, and this is the most tragic part, nobody's going to drop their football team, but they're already starting to drop, some tennis teams, lacrosse teams.
Right.
Universities have petitioned the NCAA to be able to go below 14 sports, which is the NCAA minimum. And I think you're going to come out of this with a lot of schools having 5 or 6 sports only, which will be pretty devastating, because the real student athletes, the ones who play lacrosse, the ones who are never going to be pro in anything, they're the ones who are going to get shafted. Can I use that word on the radio?
Yes. Yeah, you just did. It's done. It's out there in the ozone. Okay. Yeah, I do wonder, just the whole higher education world, what's going to happen. I just saw a story, too, about, colleges getting ready for students to ask for more financial aid because their parents are going to be out of work. I mean, it's just totally upended.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the students are already upset because the universities won't give refunds.
Right.
Even though they're stuck with online classes. They've given refunds for room and board, but not for tuition. And there's a big, look, if you're a senior, and you've gotten in someplace next year, aren't you going to want to take a gap year just because you don't want to be taking the first year?
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely. I think the finances of college education could finally implode.
Yeah. And many would say that time has come. All right, Joe Nocera, you're the best. Bloomberg opinion columnist, noted author, columnist,
I just
business
feel better
writer.
that we've talked with him.
I do too. Host of The Shrink
Really
Next
do.
Door. You really should check that out. It's going to be a movie soon. Will Ferrell, Paul Rudd. Come on. Who's gonna miss that? All right. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week continues. If you're listening on 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had...
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me. Max, you can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know...
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe. Keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 4, relax. Don't feel like you have to be productive during these stressful days? This is the perfect time to focus on yourself. Whether that means meditating, taking a bath, sleeping in, or doing nothing at all, take a deep breath and treat yourself. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellett. We move into the final hour of trading on this Thursday with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. Stocks resume their push higher after briefly dipping into negative territory when a report said a leading experimental coronavirus drug performed poorly in the test. The Financial Times reported that Gilead Sciences' antiviral drug remdesivir flopped in its first randomized clinical trial. The FT cited draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization. The drug company disputed that characterization. Gilead shares, they're trading lower now, down by 3.4%. But the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ are all higher, with the S&P up 19, up 0.7%. The Dow up 213, up 0.9, and NASDAQ up 62. That is a gain of 0.7%. The 10-year up 3/32 seconds, yield 0.60%. Gold up 0.9, now 17.29 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude up by about 23% at $16.90 a barrel. We are about 1 hour away from the latest quarterly numbers out of Intel. And with a preview, here's Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Sales of cloud chips and PCs related to working from home may cushion an expected first quarter sales decline at the chip maker. Analysts surveyed by Bloomberg are forecasting sales of just under $19 billion, down just 1% from a month ago. But Bloomberg Intelligence is more pessimistic in its outlook. It sees the coronavirus pandemic pressuring Intel's PC segment sales, with offsets from work-from-home sales declining in the second quarter.
And that's Larry Kofsky reporting. We'll have those Intel numbers as they break Intel down 0.5%. Target has seen a big boost from selling essential goods during the coronavirus pandemic, but it warns higher costs and the likelihood of having to write off slow-selling merchandise like clothing will weigh on the profitability in the current quarter. Target shares down 1.9%. Lending Club lower after the online credit marketplace announced a restructuring plan, including hundreds of job cuts. Lending Club moving lower now, down by 0.2%. Again, recapping, stocks higher, S&P up 18, up 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. California Governor Gavin Newsom giving an update on the virus in his state. Let's take you there.
For their willingness to step up and help support those that are struggling to pay their student loan debts. The second debt-related announcement I wanted to make was in relationship to the CARES Act. Many of you have received checks from the CARES Act. Some individuals receiving $1,200 checks, those with children, additional $500 contributions. But a lot of those checks, if you had debt, were garnished by debt collectors. I just signed an executive order quite literally moments ago where that no longer will be the case. The executive order denies the ability for debt collectors to garnish your CARES Act dollars. It's also retroactive. So if you're a debt collector and you did garnish those contributions, those checks, you got to give them back. And so that is effective immediately. And I want to just thank my legal team for organizing that framework over the last few days. We have been putting together that executive order and advancing a principle that I think is appropriate under the economic circumstance, and that is the nature of this emergency and crisis for individuals and families. Now is not the time to garnish those emergency contribution checks. There is a caveat, however, because we have a family first focus. If you owe child care, if you owe spousal support, this does not apply to you. And if you are an individual that receives a check but has a responsibility to a victim or a victim's account, that will continue as well. But for everyone else, no debt collector can take those direct payments any longer in the state of California. And we are assured that you will be able to claw back any of those contributions from the feds that perhaps have been taken away by those same debt collectors. So student loans, some relief, at least over the next 90 days for borrowers, 1.1 million. The state of California and all of those that have debt that are attached to the CARES Act, we hope this provides that second announcement some relief as well. Also want to express my debt of gratitude to a group of doctors that moments ago at noon today just took off from the state of California, flying into LaGuardia tonight. 14 doctors working in partnership with an organization of physicians, of physician groups from the CMA to Vituity, a group that organizes physicians. They're joining these 14 doctors, 2 doctors from UC Davis that are already in New York to work with the city of New York and their hospital and health system. Dr. Mitch Katz, who may be familiar to some of us out here in the state of California, used to run the health care system down in Los Angeles, formerly in the city of San Francisco. He runs it for the largest healthcare delivery system in our country, at least subnationally, and that's the city of New York. We are working in partnership with him. Mark Galley, who knows Mitch very well, helped organize this partnership and this collaboration. So 16 doctors leaving today, or at least joining 14 leaving today that will arrive tonight to help support for a 2-week period the needs of our fellow Americans in New York City. I just want to express my, again, deep gratitude and debt of gratitude to their willingness to really meet this moment in a profound and significant way. I want to also just extend a gratitude. It hasn't been highlighted. I wanted to make sure it was that UCSF had already sent 20 doctors and nurses for a similar purpose. So state of California, 36 doctors and nurses are now deployed into New York. And again, it's the spirit of our times, the spirit of this moment. And for those that may be dispirited by it, saying, no, wait, we need those doctors and nurses, let me remind you of the announcement we made yesterday to actually pull back on our stay-at-home orders and allow scheduled surgeries to once again go into effect, or at least be performed in our healthcare delivery system and our hospital system, because of the work we have done to decompress the system, increase the total supply of alternative care sites so we can meet our needs and meet a potential surge into the future. One of the great benefits of these doctors going out onto the front lines in New York is what they'll bring back, which is a deep understanding and knowledge of what's happening in the most acute point of the crisis in this country, and being able to bring that to bear here in the state of California. So this is an incredible opportunity for all of us in California, not just the generosity of these individuals to another state. And so again, this is a wonderful thing, and I'm very proud and pleased to make this announcement today on behalf of those doctors, on behalf of those systems and those provider groups, and just again express my gratitude. It's 2 weeks and then 2 weeks of quarantine, so it's a 1 month sacrifice of these individuals. That's a big deal, and again, we thank them. I also want to just thank, yesterday announced that the president was extending support for new swabs to get more specimens, to increase our testing capacity. We got word today that 100,000 swabs that he committed this week, 90,000 are arriving, and we'll start to distribute them in the next day or so. That's very encouraging. I know it's not the 100,000, but they told me they'll make up for that 10,000 next week when the 250,000 arrives. So conversation, commitment, promise made, promise kept, 90,000 on the way, be distributed tomorrow. I also want to just extend, in terms of numerical considerations and numbers, a depth of gratitude for all of you that signed up for the CaliforniansForAll.ca.gov website. Remember, just 2 days ago, we had a call to ask for people to volunteer their time and attention.
All right, you've been listening to California Governor Gavin Newsom on an update on the virus situation in his state. And I have to say, Jason, every time I hear about the sharing of equipment between states, or the sharing you talked about, members of the medical community going to help out New York State, New York City specifically, it just really makes me feel so proud kind of about the give and take that we're seeing among states. The two headlines that really jumped out at me, and they're on the Bloomberg. California governor says that it is banning debt collectors from taking the CARES Act checks, which makes me feel good. It also says 21 student loan companies agreeing to a 90-day forbearance. So again, looking at things to help individuals specifically get through this crisis, something that speaks really loudly to what we just heard from Joe Nacera of Bloomberg News.
Yeah, absolutely. And, interesting to hear, as you say, about the sort of sharing of doctors, and a reminder that here in the tri-state area, New York City specifically, although, we may have seen the apex, this is not over by any stretch. No. And a lot of folks still being treated, a lot of people still going into the hospital, people continuing to die of this virus. So much more work to do here, and good to hear what California is doing. All right, let's do a little Business Week economics now. A lot of economic news to get through. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, joining us from the Poconos. Yelena Shalecheva, Senior U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics. She joins us from Long Island. Yelena, I want to start with you. What are the numbers that you were looking at? Obviously, the jobless claims really... again, we talked about it at the top of the show, just amazing to get your head around, but help us understand how you take it in the broader context of what we've already heard about jobless claims and what it tells us about the economy at this moment.
Okay, so yes, the jobless claims numbers are stunning, and they continue to come in at a very high level, even though they seem to have peaked already and just slightly trending downwards. But nonetheless, these are still very, very high levels of jobless claims. And our assessment is that they will continue for quite some time. So what does it all mean for payrolls report that is coming out in a couple of weeks? That means that we will see an unprecedented decline in 1 month, in the month of April. Our prediction is for a 20 million decline in employment statistics, and also a spike in the unemployment rate towards something like 15%. So we actually prefer to look at continuing claim numbers. They might be actually telling us a little bit more of a consistent picture, because jobless claims on initial basis could be a little bit misleading. People are filing several times just out of frustration. Some people are not getting approved to receive jobless benefits. Continuing claims actually show how many people are unemployed, and it's a better indicator, in a sense, to try to see where the unemployment rate will go.
And what does it show us?
That is actually telling us that we are heading towards 15% unemployment rate in the month of April, and perhaps even higher. Our forecast is that the unemployment rate will will actually peak at 20% in May. And perhaps after that, we'll start slowly grinding down. It's not going to be a sharp decline, though, because a lot of these jobs that were lost are not coming back at once. Think about travel. Think about entertainment and restaurants. Quarantine measures will be relieved only slowly, so the labor market will not come back right away.
All right, let's bring in Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor. So you've been listening to Yelena. What jumps out at you? What's one thing you think our audience needs to know, Kathleen, whether it comes to the economic backdrop and what's going on in the bond market?
Well, I think one of the stories that should be getting a lot more play today is New York finding the virus marker. It shows that the spread of the new coronavirus found that the study, looking at that, nearly 14% of 3,000 people tested across the state had signs of the virus. That's one of the biggest U.S. reviews to date, number one. So it implies that 2.7 million residents may have had COVID-19. That's what Andrew Cuomo said at his presser today. 10 times more than the official count based on the state's testing, which, by the way, covered mostly very sick patients. So couple of implications, I think. Number one, a lot more people are getting it. The death rate is much lower if these turn out to be validated by other tallies of what's going on. Lower death rate, a lot more people getting it who may not even have known, hey, they were sick. I think this is so important because we're looking now, again, past the valley of the virus. How do we reopen? When do we open? What does this mean? And in fact, I think it was yesterday, Bloomberg had a story about some people are so afraid to go back to work because they fear they have such deadly results potentially. I mean, people have died and they're still dying, as you say, but they're mostly older. They're predominantly people with serious pre-existing conditions. If you're young and healthy, do you really need to be so afraid? I think if this is borne out, we're getting a better picture of the virus. We're getting a better picture of what it means for society. And I think that I'm actually surprised that the markets haven't taken this a little more to heart. I think the Gilead news was big. A lot of other things. The jobless claims are stunning. It just shows, and I think Yelena's right, or you said it, Carol, a lot of jobs aren't coming back. And you had a guest in the last segment, right? We were talking to Joe Nocera, and that was his concern too. Maybe half of them aren't going to come back. But this, I think, is somewhat hopeful. We just have to see more data moving in this direction.
Well, we kicked off our show talking to Anita Cicero over at Johns Hopkins, and it's interesting. She's very involved in the testing and tracing, and, our goal was to kind of understand this, because how does that help us get back to a more normal way of living? And all of this, the pieces, as the more pieces that come in and a better understanding of how many people have the virus, what's our immunity kind of just, naturally. And, again, tracing all of it and who are our most vulnerable will help us get back to normal. So I agree with you that I think it's, Jason, right? An important part of this.
No, it's absolutely critical, and really good to point out that is something that folks are really going to be watching, both from a market perspective and when we start to try and model this out, what the new normal really looks like. Our thanks to Yelena Shalecheva, Senior U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics, joining us from Long Island, and Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, joining us from the Poconos. Much more ahead. We're going to talk a little bit about Harvard in the news this week. Speaking of aid given back. Janet Lauren's going to be along to talk to us about that. In the meantime,
those stories have been big time out there on Twitter. So looking forward to talking to our Janet Lauren. Let's get another check on your top business stories. Let's turn things over to Charlie
Pellet. Here's what's going on. Want to begin with a headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service California, recording the deadliest day at 115 deaths since Wednesday. Again, 115 deaths now in California because of coronavirus. Gilead Sciences shares whipsawed for a second time in a week after a summary of a Chinese trial of its COVID-19 drug appeared to show that it was a failure. The synopsis, which the company and the scientists working on the trial said didn't fairly represent the actual results, sent Gilead shares down as much as 8.5%. Gilead shares right now are trading lower. Gilead, GILD on the ticker, down now by 4%. Stocks higher across the board. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ resuming a push higher after briefly dipping into negative territory after that report on Gilead. S&P 500 index up now by 6 points. That's a gain of 0.2%. NASDAQ up 23, up 0.3. The Dow up 99, higher by 0.4%. Best level of the day. The Dow have been up 1.7%. 10-year yield 0.60%. Gold up 0.9%, 17.28 the ounce. And crude oil right now, West Texas Intermediate, $16.83 a barrel, up 22%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on a Thursday afternoon, just trying to make sense of a lot of different things. And interesting comment that Kathleen made that, maybe the market hasn't totally appreciated, or maybe we don't know enough yet about those findings in New York. Yeah.
I don't think, the whole idea of testing, tracing, why this is so important, right? But I do think it speaks to something that everybody's been saying for a long time. We need more testing so that we can understand that, if you hear a lot of people have had the virus, but they've been okay, you think about this very differently. Instead, we see the statistics of people who are in the hospitals and really having problems with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And if so many people, if, a fifth of the people are walking around basically having had it, gotten over it, and now are very, very unlikely to get it again, that really changes the equation dramatically. When we were talking earlier to Joe Nocera, we talked about the NCAA, and obviously sports are a part of the college experience, but only a part, even though for many of us it's the most important part, but we won't get into that. But colleges, it's been front of mind what colleges and universities are going to do and what they're doing even in the meantime when it comes to aid. Let's get into that and much more with Janet Lauren. She follows all things education for us. We love catching up with her. Got to start with Harvard, Janet. What a week for them, huh?
Yes, what a week. Well, and if you look at the formula, the education department came up with a formula. 75% of it was based on, the number of low-income students. The other share was based on the total number of students. Harvard is one of the largest universities, and that's what they were allotted. And as you saw, the president criticized them. And they decided yesterday to say they're not going to accept the money. And all of their wealthy peers has done the same. Yale, Princeton, Stanford, they've all said the same thing, that they're not going to take the money.
Which I got to say, we talked about this. Jason and I talked about this on air. And I said, well, this is... They didn't do anything wrong. This is the government program, allows them this money. Right. And man, people on Twitter came back and said, don't give Harvard a pass by saying the government decided to send them the money. They need to return it. I mean, it's considering that it's Harvard and they actually
didn't receive it. They were told this would be their allocation.
Okay, but they could have.
They could have. Yes, absolutely.
The money was effectively on the way. So what does it tell us, I guess, Janet, more broadly about what schools more broadly need beyond the Harvards, beyond the Ivies and the Stanfords of the world? Because this is, I think it's fair to say, a time of crisis in higher education on many fronts.
Yes, absolutely. And we don't know who's showing up in the fall. We don't know if the freshman classes are going to be anywhere near where they need to be to give the schools enough revenue to operate. We don't know if the sophomore class is going to be much smaller. We do know that the students are going to be a lot needier. So whatever financial aid budgets they had previously, it's going to be very likely a lot bigger, and the schools will try to accommodate that. But with fewer students, they canceled a lot of their summer programs that give them, a really nice cushion of revenue that they get every year, and that money is just gone because they can't have kids on campus. And they made, there was a significant revenue generator having, thousands of high school students coming to your campuses and filling the dorms, having weddings, having band camps, hosting high school graduations, you name it, that money's all gone now.
Well, and I guess, Janet, one of the things I keep coming back to is this notion that most people would agree, especially people who have to write the checks to send their kids to college, and the kids themselves going to college who have some financial stake in the game, that college is extraordinarily expensive. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
Absolutely.
And yet on the other side, you have a lot of colleges and universities essentially saying, without the revenue that we are counting on, just as you very well described, we will go broke. What's the disconnect there, and how does it change?
Well, parents are paying a lot of money for intimate experiences with professors, small seminars, interactions with kids, leadership in clubs. And if they're not getting that, why would they pay $70,000 or whatever they're paying? And, I think you're going to see a lot of kids not want to go in the fall, and justifiably so. Why would anyone want to start college online when they're paying the full price?
Right.
So the question is, we don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And the traditional date of acceptance is May 1st. A lot of colleges have moved that to June 1st and even July 1st. So we won't get a better sense for quite a bit. But we do know that that revenue that's expected to come in is likely not going to be the same.
I have to say, and it was something Jonas Sarah mentioned, but I really thought about this. I have a niece who's supposed to start college in the fall, but this whole idea of a gap year. Like, why wouldn't you, and I know that's a hard thing to consider, but if you know it's going to be kind of a weird year and you just don't know what it's going to be like, certainly in the fall, and who knows what it means, carrying over into the new year, I do wonder if that will pick up some momentum, Janet.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal gap year program. You could try to get a job, or you could volunteer, or you could spend time with your grandparents and defer for a year, and you're not really losing anything. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of kids make that decision.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we know you're going to continue to follow this story, Janet, because I feel like the fallout to some extent is just beginning, especially when you think about it. I mean, I've been talking to some folks who work at smaller colleges and universities, and they're just saying that, this is an existential crisis in many ways. All right, Janet Lauren, always love catching up with her, following all things education, higher education, endowments, and, starting with the Harvard story this week, which obviously caught a lot of headlines, and Carol, as you say, just blew up on Twitter. It wasn't these made for social media sort of moments, obviously propelled by the president in his daily press conference, and that was when it really caught fire. But, Harvard is a sort of an almost like third rail word in some cases, right?
It's something, a university system that's got incredibly deep pockets and alumni who will make sure that the money continues flowing. So it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about how we talked with Mike that there's not great models for the economy right now because we've never seen these kind of statistics. And I feel like even for universities, the financial crisis isn't the same, even though they saw cutbacks. This is just a whole different ballgame.
It is. There was a funny story about how the most oft word used by CEOs these days, unprecedented. Makes sense.
Almost a drinking
unprecedented
game.
Use.
Almost a drinking game. Unprecedented.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are higher in the final hour after pulling back earlier on word that an experimental coronavirus drug reportedly failed in a clinical trial. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 119, the S&P 500 up 7, the Nasdaq Composite up 28. The threat of a U.S. meat shortage is growing by the day. At least 8 major U.S. meat facilities have closed in recent weeks. The latest is a Tyson Foods beef plant in Pasco, Washington, where workers are being tested for COVID-19. Automakers are edging closer to restarting production. Toyota, Tesla, VW, and Hyundai say they'll resume some production in early May. The 3 Detroit car makers are in talks with the UAW to reopen their plants. One long-term effect of the coronavirus lockdown may be on commercial real estate. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink doesn't think any company will again have all of its employees in the office, meaning less need for office space. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in a challenging and...
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you! I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. That's right. They can help save lives by simply washing their hands. Just 20 seconds of thorough hand washing after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside can help fight against the dastardly spread of germs. Armed with only soap and water and hands, your superhero can protect you, your family, and everyone out there in America land. Amazing! Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about.
Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, coming up, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Dave Wilson is going to be along with his chart of the day. Always love catching up with him on that, Carol. And a little bit later on, we're going to catch up with the CEO of State Street, Ron O'Hanley, and the CEO of Slack. So CEO coming up.
So much to get to. All right, let's get another check, though, on the trading day. We've got just about 29 minutes to go, Charlie Pellet.
All right, thank you very much, Carol Master. Great reason for all those CEOs to keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio. And, of course, the close today, we've got 28 minutes to go. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ higher right now, but just a few minutes ago, we did see the S&P 500 index dip very briefly into the red. Right now, looking at a 5-point gain, up 0.2%. The Dow up 100, up 0.4. NASDAQ up 14. That's a gain of 0.2%. We did get a report saying that a leading experimental coronavirus drug did not perform well, performing poorly in a test. The S&P 500 index had been up by as much as 0.5% after we got the data on Gilead Sciences' antiviral drug remdesivir, saying it flopped in its first randomized clinical trial. This, according to the Financial Times, citing draft documents published accidentally by the World Health Organization. Now, the drug company Gilead is disputing that characterization. Gilead shares are trading lower now. They are down by 4.4%. S&P 500 index up 4. The Dow up 95, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 13, higher by 0.2%. One of the big unknowns with the global pandemic is what we could see this fall and winter come flu season, and will there be a recurrence of COVID-19? Dr. Jason Farley is a professor of nursing at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
We're concerned about co-occurring respiratory viruses in the same season, which will complicate decision-making. And it's not exactly that we don't anticipate coronavirus to return during the fall. We absolutely expect a second wave of infection to occur. We've already seen it around the world.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Amazon's price target raised to a street-high view of $2,900 at Goldman Sachs, the latest firm to see stronger long-term prospects for the company as a result of the pandemic. Right now, Amazon is up 1.4% at $23.96. Intel will be reporting after the closing bell. Intel shares lower now by 1.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. I feel like I'm watching Forrest Gump or something.
I was totally thinking about that.
I know. Get out of my head.
I know. Well, that movie, man, just so incredible. And the soundtrack alone.
I don't think there's a Forrest Gump.
Is that the Chambers Brothers?
Correct, Carol.
Look at you.
Had my Wheaties today.
She has got the classic rock genre just nailed down. By the way, Jason Flom said that yesterday, that rock is having a resurgence in terms of like back catalog during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Do you find that interesting, Dave? More rock being played?
I do.
I think it's like comfort food.
To show you, classic rock is sort of like the musical equivalent of comfort food.
Yeah, that's what Jason Kelly just said.
Get out of my head, Wilson.
Mind meld. There's like a triangle mind meld happening here.
All right, so time, gold, is that what we're talking about here, Dave?
Right. You know, for a whole lot of people, every time is the time for gold. The real question is, well, where are we now? And you've seen the price of the precious metal pop up in the last several months. And now it looks like we're seeing gold mining stocks gain strength. And the way that you can draw that conclusion, at least how I did it in my chart, is comparing an exchange-traded fund that owns these shares, the VanEck Vectors Gold Miners ETF, with the SPDR S&P 500 ETF. So you have sort of a common denominator there in a sense. Well, this year, the ratio between the two has jumped 28%. At least it was there through yesterday. So it tells you that the gold mining stocks are doing better in relative terms as, you know, of course, shares have been falling. And beyond that, the mining ETF set a 7-year high yesterday. And, it's like whenever you see more than one analyst talk about the same thing, at least for me, it gets my attention.
Right.
So yesterday you had Michael Purvis at Tallback and Capital Advisors talking about how this ETF, ticker is GDX, by the way, is headed for $40, quote, in the next 3 to 4 months and quite possibly much sooner. And I had seen a report earlier in the day from Jonathan Krinsky at Baycrest Partners. He's talking $42. So put it all together, there's some optimism that what we've seen with the gold mining stocks, given all the upheaval resulting from the coronavirus, may keep going for a while and push up that particular ETF. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
All right. I like the title, too, Time for Glitter. It's good.
That was good. That was good. Taking us back. I might pull out Forrest Gump. My daughter hasn't seen Forrest Gump. I don't think she's seen it yet.
Have I ever told you the story about going to see Forrest Gump?
No.
All right, this is a very quick story.
Dave, stay
you'll
with
like
us.
This.
Okay.
Dave, stay with us. You'll like this. So my brother Wynn, great guy, sees Forrest Gump and basically creates this whole outing when we're down at the beach so that we can go see Forrest Gump together because he really wants me to see it. I was in college and I was this, full of myself college kid who thought I'm doing the cool stuff. I'd just seen Pulp Fiction. It was the same year that it came out. And we go to see Forrest Gump, and me being the too cool for school guy, I come out and he's like, "What did you think? Wasn't that amazing?" I was like, "It was okay." He loses it on me in the middle of a parking lot in Destin, Florida, and basically is like, "There is something wrong with you. You cannot be entertained. It is impossible for you to be entertained if you didn't like that movie."
Do you have a new view on it?
I do have a new view on it.
It's so well done.
It's really well done, and it has a great soundtrack, Dave, and it's like a portrait of American history.
Yep,
Dave,
absolutely.
Dave, what's wrong with Jason?
I don't know. He just has different tastes than a lot of people, I suppose.
It's just from a piece of film. It's
It is.
just how it's done is so incredible.
It is.
And
It's
then
really
the
good. And
music
I've come to appreciate it. But I will say it is sort of a gift to my extended family and even my children because they still use "it's impossible for you to be entertained." And I have to say, he wasn't saying that in the way I'm saying it to you now. He was screaming at me like, "There is something wrong with you." So, in any case, yeah. It's family lore. I mean,
as siblings can do, right?
This happened obviously 25 plus years ago. So, in any case, but yeah, Forrest Gump.
He feels the
great
same way
soundtrack.
still.
Maybe. Yeah. It checks out.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you. Love the chart of the day. See, opened up that rabbit hole and look where we went.
You just go right down. You got. I'm easily taken down it. All
Yes,
right.
you are. Apparently not easily entertained, but we'll just shelve that for now. All right, let's get back to world and national news headlines. Let's check in once again with Bob Boone. Hey, Bob.
Carol, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo responds today to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and remarks he would not support bailout funds for states battling COVID-19. McConnell reportedly called it a blue state bailout and said states should go bankrupt. Cuomo says McConnell's trying to divide the nation.
There is no red and blue. There should have never been a red and blue when it comes to any important issue, but certainly not now. And that's not what this country's all about. It's not red and blue, it's red, white, and blue.
California records its deadliest day yet, 115 more deaths in 24 hours. No, boomers are not okay. Neither are many other helpless Americans. Ravaged nursing homes are pleading for more testing after 2 months and more than 10,000 deaths have made them some of the most terrifying places to be right now. An industry group says only about a third of the country's 15,000 nursing homes have ready access to tests that can help isolate the sick and stop the spread. Federal health officials are recommending precautions with your house pets. Bloomberg's Michael Barr reports.
For the first time in the U.S., 2 house cats have tested positive for COVID-19. In one of their homes, the cat has the virus, but none of the humans do. The CDC is now issuing recommendations for keeping you and your pets safe. Try not to let your animals interact with people from outside households. Keep pets indoors and maintain social distancing while going on walks. The CDC also says avoid dog parks or public places. Michael Barr, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting.
Dating can be tricky, especially when you can't meet face-to-face. So it's time to get creative with the easy way to replace physical dates, Video Call from Bumble, the dating app where women make the first move. Here's Anna Williamson and Tom Reed-Wilson with some tips on connecting online.
It's a bit harder to flirt with limited body language, but nothing beats a smile and some eye contact to show them you're interested.
And have an activity plan for your date. This will help break the ice.
Download Bumble today.
We've never been further apart, yet somehow never closer. At Barclays, we think it's important to celebrate the people making a difference and help support those affected during these extraordinary times. That's why we're supporting the Big Night In appeal. We've kickstarted our donation with £1 million. And if you're a Barclays customer, we'll match your donation pound for pound, up to a total of another £1 million. So if you can, please join Barclays and donate at barclays.co.uk. All donations will be split between the registered charities.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our after show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, I just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks higher, Gilead lower. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's after. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks in the green, but off their session highs. Dow's currently up 130 points, was up 400. S&P is currently up 8. NASDAQ climbs by 27. The U.S. 10 yield at 0.6%. WTI crude futures gain 23%. Small caps rise 13 points. Transports climb 1.8%. And semis are down 0.5%. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, UNH, ExxonMobil, and Chevron, while McDonald's, Walmart, and Intel led to the downside. After earnings, Invesco plunged 22% to the lowest level since 1996, and Seagate fell 6%. In other news, you mentioned Gilead. That company fell intraday after a data leak on their coronavirus drug trials. And wrapping things up, some of the names pointing after the bell tonight include Intel and E-Trade. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, I thank you very much, Bill Maloney. Intel now down by 1.3%. We'll be all over Intel and E-Trade as those numbers break. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type Squawk, SQUAWK, on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, just got about 10 minutes left in today's trading session. We've been bouncing around. Right now, we're just off our lows of the session. Still a little bit higher on those major equity averages, but definitely way off our highs of this session. Let's get into it with Jack McIntyre. He's Global Fixed Income Portfolio Manager of Brandywine Global Investment Management. He joins us on the phone from Philadelphia. Jack, nice to have you here. Talk to us a little bit about your world and investing right now.
So, all right, being global, that opens up. We can invest anywhere in the world. So, we've got kind of a barbell portfolio. So one of the things that we've been doing, the biggest change, is we've been increasing our investment-grade corporate bond exposure. And the reason being is that, we're not just, we're not fighting the Fed, we're joining the Fed. We're taking what they're giving us. We're doing some very high-quality names. But, we've raised some dollars, but we still have some EM exposure. And that's been the part of the portfolio that certainly has underperformed. I think from a valuation standpoint, it's compelling. But
again, there's a lot of uncertainty coming out of this, and that's probably what the markets are kind of wrestling with now. It's not necessarily the flattening of the infection curves, but what's the world going to look like coming out of this? And this is where we kind of all have to sort of guess a little bit how we think it's going to play out.
Well, Jack, that's a really interesting point because, I mean, this is to go back to what you said, this is a global pandemic and it has played out very unevenly around the world. And I think there is a lot of discussion out there as to what this actually looks like when maybe it hits in a more meaningful way, especially in some of those emerging markets. We had a guest on, I believe it was earlier this week, talking about how there are very, very few cases in Africa, for instance, right now. Maybe that will remain, but we've seen a huge surge, I believe, in India. So what does it take, and how do you do the work to kind of synthesize the medical side and the investment side?
So, it's a great question. And, to be honest, I mean, there's no set answer. What we have to do is kind of go back and look at everything from, the demographics in EM. Obviously, well, not obviously, but a lot of countries have younger, parts of the population. Well, it looks like they're better positioned to come out of this. Some countries, they've kind of gone through their versions of pandemics. Maybe their immune systems are in better shape, but, no, and we obviously know, they don't have the fiscal resources to do what we're doing in the developed world. We know the healthcare systems are underinvested, all that kind of stuff. I kind of use that because, hey, the market knows that, and if the market knows that, isn't that already sort of discounted in price? I mean, I've yet to hear anybody say, come out and be very positive on EM. And I'm not saying, I don't want the listeners to go out and pile into EM, because there is risk doing that. It's part of our portfolio. It's not the entire portfolio. I think the way we're thinking about investing in this world is that, hey, if I'm going to put something that's going to do well in a risk-on environment, well, I need to add something that's going to do well in a risk-on environment, because nobody's got the kind of conviction. I would just kind of bring out the point that, we do maybe have some type of model, looking to China. I mean, maybe they weren't transparent in the beginning, but they're coming out of this. And I think it's the framework that might work in the U.S. is that as they bring their economy back online, people are going back to work, but they're slower to go into the leisure parts of their society and their daily activities. So I think that's going to be the model that we're going to follow in the U.S.
So what kind of, so you're playing into sovereign debt, right, around the world. And I do wonder, we do know global central banks, man, they'll do what they need to make sure they prop up their economies right now, right? So it's coming from all of the central bankers, or the majority of them around the globe. What are the bets you want to make? What are the bets that you feel most confident? Because I look at your portfolio, which you guys have actually done pretty well in the last 1 year or so. I think up 9%, putting you in the 95th percentile. But it's not been an easy market, longer term for you. So what's the bets that you feel that you can make with confidence right now?
So yeah, you're right. I mean, because it's been a rough March for us. I mean, we were positioned for the things that kind of played out in the fourth quarter, and the world quickly changed very, very quickly. So I do think, the premise is interesting, because I think you defined it very clearly. And so we're in a war. Obviously, it's things around the virus, and maybe the virus is going to get worse, but then we have the policymakers, the fiscal policymakers, the monetary policymakers. They've taken this mantra, we're going to do whatever it takes. So this is Draghi's model in 2012. They've all adopted it. So they're going to get tested. So this is why we're going to continue to see different amounts of fiscal stimulus, different monetary policy. So, that's going to create some stability. And then ultimately, we're going to have to see some progress on the medical front. So, I'm not sure, to be honest, it's a high conviction type world right now. We are positioned, but what we're also doing is extending our time horizon, because there isn't clarity what's going to happen a month, a quarter from now. But, if a year from now, 2 years, if you have that ability to have that sort of time frame, I can come up with a more constructive sort of view, because I think the stimulus could actually hit at a time that maybe we're starting to see some improvement, around the virus, around the uptick in economic activity. And that could set a decent backdrop for risk assets. But again, that's getting the timing right is the hard part.
Big question, and we only have about 30 seconds for you to answer it, Jack. But oil, I mean, that obviously has had partially to do with the pandemic, but largely outside of it. How does that figure into your thesis here?
So you're right. I think it's mostly, I'd say, 80% driven by demand side, driven by, the pandemic. There's a supply issue. There's a leverage. The hedge fund guys, the CTAs, commodity trading advisors, they're still really long oil contracts. So, they can't take this much pain. So they're unwinding these things. So, yeah, it's just reflective of a weak demand, which reflects the slowdown in global growth.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Jack McIntyre. He is I want to make sure I get your title right, Global Fixed Income Portfolio Manager for Brandywine Global Investment Management, joining us on the phone from Philadelphia. Coming up, we're going to head to Boston, Carol, and we are going to hear from Ron O'Hanley, a guy that I know pretty well, CEO of State Street. Really interesting guy, broad perspective. Really looking forward to that.
Right, and also thinking about our environment as well, what we're learning in this shutdown. I was listening to some statistics about what's happening in terms of wildlife and our skies as a result of this shutdown. So we'll get into some of that with him as well. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Jason Kelly, The Close, coming your way in just a moment.
The starting gun for your weekday race.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Wi-Fi connection spotty? Make sure you're never without something to listen to by offlining your podcasts on TuneIn. Just find your favorite podcast and tap the 3 dots to download the episodes you want to hear. When you're off the grid, you'll find all your offline audio under your favorites.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your 7th inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting 9 podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks fluctuating right into the close. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange, being run today by Mark Casalanova, who is supervisor of facilities. He's all alone at the NYSE ringing that bell. Turned out to be a losing day for the Dow, actually for the S&P and NASDAQ. The Dow did hold on to a gain, up 35 points, up by about 0.2%, but the S&P down a point, swinging between gains and losses right into the close there, down by 1 point, down by about 0.1%. NASDAQ lower by 0.5 point today, little change there. The 10-year up 7/32 with a yield of 0.59% right now. Gold up 1.1%, $17.32 the ounce. And again, West Texas Intermediate crude rallying today, up by 23%. WTI now at just below $17 a barrel. So again, fluctuation the theme, at least in the final few minutes. Recapping, S&P 500 index down by a point, ending the session at 27.97, a drop today of just about 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I want to welcome our Boston listeners on 106.1 there in Boston. And we're going to take you to Boston for a conversation I've really been looking forward to, and I know Carol has as well. Yeah. Ron O'Hanley joining us, Chairman and CEO of State Street. He joins us on the phone from Boston, as I said. Ron, great to have you on the program. Nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Jason, Carol.
So I want to jump right into it. You're managing a global enterprise. You've managed through some crises before. What's top of your agenda right now as we deal with this pandemic?
Well, what we're thinking about, right, a lot of things are top of the agenda, but I think on the top of the top would be how we think about bringing people back to work. Everybody's talking about it. We've had some experience in it because, Jason, as you would know, we have a large operation in China, 3,000 people there. So we had the work from home hit us early back in January, and we started bringing people back to work in late March, and we're back up to about 75% there. So we've learned something from that. But how this plays out for us worldwide, we operate in 29 countries. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll be. We all knew when we had to leave. I don't think we're all going to know when it's okay to come back. And so we're thinking about a staged return and one that has employee safety at the top of the list.
Wow. I was just thinking about what you just said. We didn't know when to leave, and we won't know when to come back. You're so right. Our cover story in Bloomberg Business Week magazine is about Wuhan coming back, right? And we are all so closely watching China, but coming back means, workers are wearing masks and gloves. They're not taking elevators. They're taking steps. There's a lot of social distancing. What have you seen in terms of the workers that you're bringing back in China? What's work life going to be like here in the U.S. when we do kind of get back to work?
Yeah, so what our business in China, in terms of the part that has the most people, is an operational business. So it tends to be a fairly densely packed office setting that you'd be familiar with, almost trading floor style. Mm-hmm. Today, people are spaced out more than they were in the past. Nobody faces each other. There's testing on the way in and on the way out, and masks are worn at all times except for eating. But the key thing that we found was, people, and I know there's a lot of talk about this, I don't think people are necessarily going to be comfortable coming back to work right away. They're going to want to know that they're going to be safe. So part of the way we went about it was we brought people back in very small ways, and we invited them back. They didn't have to come. We decided which group we wanted to bring back first, and we invited that group, and if they chose not to come, that's fine. They could work from home. But once people saw how the facility had changed, got comfortable with the testing, got comfortable with the environment, pretty soon it was we were in effect oversubscribed in the invitations. And I think we're going to have to pursue something like that basically in all parts of the world. First, you have to ensure that you're safe. Well, first you have to decide when it's right to come back. And there, I think that that this is where the data, the statistical data, and the biology need to meet. And I'm no expert in this, but in effect, the more people that have been exposed, assuming that you believe that there's some immunity that's built up after that, which most of the medical professionals do, then in effect, the areas that have had the most exposure are going to be the ones statistically that are going to be the safest. That doesn't mean that that we still have to do social distancing pricing and things like that. But that's how we're going about it. So areas where the peak is, come and gone, and where we have some confidence will probably be the areas we bring back first.
So, Ron, I will grant you're not a medical expert, although you're a very bright guy, but you are an expert when it comes to the financial system, and people are looking to you and other leaders in the financial industry to help sort of stabilize the system, which it feels like we have. Tell us about how you've been involved, what you've been doing. I believe you were working early with the Fed there in Boston on liquidity. What did you do? What do we need to do now to ensure that this system is ready for the recovery?
Well, firstly, I give the Federal Reserve, I give the Treasury, I give just regulators and policymakers in general a lot of credit for how they've handled this. I think right away everybody realized that this was not an economic crisis that was caused by some kind of financial catastrophe, but rather it was a forced shutdown of economic activity that was quickly transmitting to the financial system. So everybody moved quite quickly to make sure that transacting could occur, and to do that you need to have liquidity in the system. So that's when you saw the various programs that the Fed put in place. I think the one you're referring to is the money market liquidity facility, which was really about making sure as this kind of wave of cash was coming in, and as people were worried about asset allocation and re-asset allocation, that those kinds of funds could operate properly.
And critical to your business, right? I mean, that was really important for you, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a business for us. Obviously, we're much bigger in the servicing of those assets. And it was because we serviced so many of those funds that we worked with the Fed before it became operational, and agreed with the Fed, as did others after us, that listen, we'll take the money. We'll take the money early before you're operational, because part of what you need to do in these kinds of crises, if people know they can transact, then oftentimes they won't transact. I mean, ultimately, we talk about machines, we talk about computers, but there's human beings behind all of this, including the algorithms. So it was very important for those participating in the markets to know that they could transact. And in effect, that's what the Fed and Treasury have done. Is work through market segment by market segment. First, the money market funds, then the bond markets, the commercial paper markets, to ensure, particularly at a time when economic activity was going to be intentionally brought to zero, that businesses would have the ability to access the capital markets.
One thing I want to ask you, because this is something that's really struck me, is the virus has laid bare on man's impact on Earth. We have the stories about animals now, out at Yosemite, you're seeing tons of bears, you're seeing animals in cities, the Himalayas you can finally see. I do wonder what your thoughts are about that, maybe what we can learn and maybe what we can do better on the other side of this virus. And just got roughly about a minute or so left.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a reminder that as we think about how we're going to operate in our lives, how we're going to operate our businesses, that we have to think about the long term here. And we now know what the Himalayas look like. And if you're sitting in a large city in India, many people have never seen them before. So we've got to take that and keep that in mind as we think about what's the right balance between, for example, short-term economic development and what's right long-term for the planet, for businesses long-term, and for generations that are going to follow.
All right.
And I just want to put out, you wrote actually a blog post on Earth Day, and we'll try and get that out there on Twitter. And I know ESG is certainly something that you're really sensitive about, or sensitive to, Ron. So thank you so much for that.
All right, Ron O'Hanley, thank you so much. Really good to spend some time with you, Chairman and CEO of State Street, joining us on the phone from Boston. We're going to toss it back to Tom Maroney and Joe Schwartzley for more of Bay State business there in Boston. 106.1, our station there, our proud station there in Boston. And Carol, great to catch up with Ron. I mean, listen, I mean, this is a guy, I mean, he's worked at Fidelity, went to Harvard Business School, as you say, sort of a big thinker in many ways. Absolutely. And at the forefront of a lot of things. And notable that he took the time amid this crisis to point out was Earth Day, and this is something we need to be concerned about. And that global footprint, obviously, important to him.
Well, it's constantly these conversations that we keep having about what will we learn from this? What will we do better on the other side? And my fingers are crossed that we do a lot of things better, including taking care of Earth.
All right, let's head out to San Francisco now. Ed Baxter is there with World National Headlines. Hey, Ed.
All right, Jason. Hi, Carol. President Donald Trump has made himself daily spokesman, as you know, for the fight against coronavirus. Today, Associated Press Newark Center of Public Affairs research shows only 23% of those surveyed have high levels of trust, what the president is telling the public. 23%. Another 21% trust him a moderate amount. His overall approval rating remains, though, at 42%. In California today, a sad signpost, the most deadly day to date. Governor Gavin Newsom says it is not time by any stretch to open up.
I know there's deep desire. People are making calls on an hourly basis saying it's time to open back up. Consider the deadliest day in the state of California for the last 24 hours. 8.5% increase in the total number of deaths. We saw 5.6% increase in the total number of people tested positive.
Now, along with those increases, there's encouraging news. The governor says a decrease in hospitalizations and ICU admissions. He also announced a vast majority of those holding student loans will have payback put on hold for 90 days. Dr. Anthony Fauci addressing governors' concern.
The one way not to reopen the economy is to have a rebound that we can't take care of. So please, again, let me just close by pleading with the American public in general and those who are responsible leaders to carefully consider how we get back to normal.
He says do not leapfrog, and the current formula, he says, is working. New York's death rate has slowed, and hospitalizations remain relatively flat. Governor Andrew Cuomo says in the first antibody testing program, 13.9% of those who hadn't tested positive for the disease do have antibodies.
What does that mean? It means these are people who were infected and who developed the antibodies to fight the infection.
And he says shows it could be a wider imprint on the community of cases at large. He also says Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's idea of letting states go bankrupt is, his word, dumb. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. All right, let's go to a guy who's at the opposite end of that, a bright guy, Charlie Pellet.
Oh, you're so kind to say that. Here's what's going on. Got to begin with the Intel numbers. Red headlines on the Bloomberg first quarter revenue, $19.8 billion. Estimates there, $18.83. Intel sees second quarter revenue in the range of $18.5 billion. Estimates for $18.08. Intel, though, pulling its 2020 forecast on, quote, significant economic uncertainty. Shares of Intel down now by just about 5.3%. This update brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, offering an MBA that provides STEM professionals with a technology-focused experience. Learn more at njit.edu/MBA. Turned out to be a mixed Thursday with the Dow higher by 39, up 0.2%. S&P down 1.5 points, fluctuating right into the closing bell there, ending the session at 27.97. A losing day there. NASDAQ little changed as well, down by less than half a point. We've got the 10-year up 8/30 seconds, yield there 0.59%. Gold up 1% today, higher by $17 the ounce at $17.31. Crude, big story, big move again today, up 23%. West Texas Intermediate crude $16.96 a barrel. Again, recapping, S&P down a point, little change there. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Jason Keller. We promised you leaders from all walks of life. We just heard from Ron O'Hanley, Chairman and CEO over at State Street. Now we are going to talk about industrials and specifically the metals market. Let's bring in our next guest. Barbara Smith is Chairman, President, and CEO of the Irving, Texas-based and publicly traded commercial metals company. She joins us on the phone from Oklahoma. Barbara, thank you so much for finding time for us here at Bloomberg Radio. I hope you're safe, your family's safe, and tell me a little bit about how your company is doing and your team is doing.
Well, thank you for having me on, Carol, and we are all safe. And commercial metals, relatively speaking, is doing quite well. We qualify as an essential infrastructure company, so we have been continuing to operate throughout the pandemic. We, of course, are first and foremost interested in the safety and well-being of our employees, but also, we are pleased that we're keeping our employees employed and working during this time.
So let's talk about that employment picture if we can, Barbara. Any layoffs so far? Are you having to cut pay? I just want to make sure that we understand sort of how exactly you're dealing with this.
Yes, thus far we have not had any reductions in force of any consequence, and we are maintaining our full salaries at this time. Yes.
How longer can you do that? I'm curious about. I mean, we've heard from so many different companies about the pressures right now. How long can you sustain that?
Well, we operate with a backlog of projects that are pre-funded, and construction activity is generally done in the open air, and construction activity has continued. So we have a good backlog that we can service for many months to come. I think it's anybody's guess where the economy is going in the future, but at this point in time, we have a significant backlog to service that will keep us going.
And so when you think about that backlog, Barbara, it obviously exists now, and we all know, if we didn't know before, we know now that the future is a little bit hard to predict. We're talking about an economy that certainly is certainly going to be in recession. People talk about a depression. How much do you worry that maybe some of that backlog could disappear?
Well, we also continue to see bidding and booking of new projects. Clearly, we're a cyclical company. We've undergone, recessions and economic downturns in the past. Our business model is definitely geared towards monitoring those things and reacting. We have a flexible cost structure with our electric arc furnace technology, and certainly we'll be watching all of the market dynamics and the demand signals, and if we see a retraction in activity, we're going to make some needed adjustments to respond to that.
Yeah, and I, if I may push you a little bit, because I know you guys have, I guess most of your exposure is in that construction market. Is there a worry, you talked about backlogs, that once you finish all those projects that you're currently working on, that the pipeline many months out will be weaker due to demand destruction impacting the economy? And I know it's hard, nobody has a crystal ball, but I wonder if you're having discussions along those lines.
Well, I think it would be prudent for every company to be looking at contingency planning and upside and downside scenarios. So we're no different than any other company. We very carefully monitor in good times and in bad times what our bidding and our booking activity is. Just to be clear, our backlog has a variety of duration. It could be projects that have a 6-month duration. It could be projects that have a 3-year duration. And most of those projects are pre-funded. And what we've seen in our past experience in severe economic retraction is those projects will be serviced and completed. I think the other factor is much of our backlog also involves infrastructure work, and there's talk of an infrastructure program to stimulate the economy as states start to bring back activity. That certainly would be a welcome sign for us. There is an existing infrastructure program in place that has many projects that are ongoing and that are in the pipeline, and we have some projects that booked just recently that are related to infrastructure. I also believe there will be an adjustment in the supply chain, and there will be, industrial activity brought back to the U.S. There will be, some of the critical items that we find ourselves not producing in the U.S. I think the supply chain is going to be adjusted, and that could be a potential future opportunity for increased construction activity in the United States.
That's really interesting that you mentioned that. And we're speaking with Barbara Smith, President and CEO of Commercial Metals. So, Barbara, what would that look like, and how soon do you think that could happen, that adjustment in the supply chain? Because this was at the heart of things that we were discussing before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, but I think the pandemic really brought to life some of the things that we would want to have control over. The steel industry, of course, has been beating this drum for a long time that we need to maintain certain critical capabilities within the United States to service our national security and all of our other needs. And I think that this has highlighted other areas of the economy where more of the supply chain has been outsourced to other parts of the world. And, I think it's quite remarkable how quickly we were able to respond and to begin to produce some of these really critical items. But I certainly believe going forward, there's going to be a lot of attention taken to not finding ourselves in that reactionary position in the future. And I think you're going to see a fair amount of activity come back to the States.
One thing I'm also curious, and this is something that Jason and I've talked about a lot with some of our guests, is, you understand the impact on maybe, one particular industry and the big players, but then you have to think about the supply chains. I mean, everything is so impacted. I am curious what you're hearing from either your customers or some of your suppliers, whether it's the automotive industry or other industries that tap into your company. What are they saying? And I know visibility is so tough right now, Barbara, but I'm just curious. I think we're all just looking for something to give us a better idea of what life after the virus looks like.
Yeah, and, I don't think my crystal ball is any greater than anyone else's. Just to clarify, I would say roughly 80% of our revenue is oriented towards construction, and about 20% would go into what I would categorize as general industrial activity, so some of those end markets that you named, but we have very, very little exposure to energy or automotive. And I do think that some of those end markets clearly will be slower to recover, but we don't have an enormous amount of exposure to those end markets, so be a little bit difficult for me to make any predictions there.
All right, but your folks then in the construction area, in terms of what they're telling, I know you talk about an infrastructure bill. Does anybody have a better feel of what life looks like after the virus?
Well, again, I think that as far as commercial metals is concerned, we're used to cycles in an economy, and we will monitor all of the demand activity, and we will make adjustments as we see necessary. We're fortunate from the perspective that we have been able to continue to operate at almost near normal levels. We have not seen measurable pullback in activity at this point in time. Clearly, we're anticipating some slowing going forward. I think we have to see how these states open up and, just continue to monitor it. I think the activity is not going to go to zero.
Right.
And as I explained, we work from a very, very healthy backlog. The economy was extremely strong before this occurred, and that is, our good fortune in this moment that we had that extremely strong backlog to service while we monitor the effects of the pandemic and the economic impact. But if you think about an infrastructure program or any construction activity coming out of this, this would be an ideal time. I mean, interest rates are very, very low. Labor would be available. I think many of the input costs into a project would not only be available, but probably would be at a more affordable cost than when you're at a very, very peak demand type of scenario. So hopefully all of those factors will play into bringing back the activity level in a better way than, certainly what some folks may be contemplating at this moment in time. And as I said, I think medium and long term, there's really a huge opportunity in the U.S. for more activity as supply chains are adjusted and some of those critical supplies are brought back here for manufacturing.
It's a really interesting notion, the idea that this could have some fundamental change. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Barbara Smith, President and CEO of Commercial Metals. It's a company based in Irving, Texas. She joined us on the phone from Oklahoma. Coming up, another CEO perspective further west. We're going to talk to the CEO of Slack.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Andrew Butterfield, he'll be with us in just a few. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street was ready to celebrate both the prospect of more aid to small businesses from Congress and an almost 20% jump in oil prices, but stocks finished on both sides of the flat line. The Dow up only 39, the Nasdaq down a fraction, the S&P falling 2. That after a Chinese trial of a Gilead Sciences drug, remdesivir, to treat COVID-19 appeared to fail. Investors had ignored the almost 4.5 million new unemployment claims filed last week. Southwest Airlines CEO says he'd like to avoid the company's first ever furloughs or layoffs, but he says the airline has to prepare to become a drastically smaller company. He says he'd prefer an across-the-board pay cut. And chip maker Intel isn't impressing investors with its sales outlook, and that isn't even accounting for the Bloomberg News report that says Apple plans to start selling Mac computers with its own chips instead of Intel's next year. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in...
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor of a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right. By replacing get-togethers with virtual play dates and video chats, they can help slow the evil spread of germs. And if your superheroes do go outside, make sure they continue their superhero wing by staying 6 feet away from others to protect everyone in America land. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby. And after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air. And they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all of your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find the Your New Episode section to see the latest additions.
With With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening. TuneIn makes it easy to be a part of the conversation. Just make sure push notifications are enabled to hear about breaking news and trending topics from around the sports world. You'll also get custom recommendations of podcasts and radio stations covering the sports and teams you care about. The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you, I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling.
Live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Coming up, Intel coming out with their numbers. We're going to dig into what they had to say. Obviously, a bellwether always has been, probably always will be, in terms of demand, especially for computers.
Yeah, and the stock is selling off in the aftermarket. We'll see where it is. We're going to check in, though, with Anand Srinivasan of Bloomberg Intelligence in just a moment. Back, though, to some of the news after the closing bell. Here is, once again, Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Anand will have us covered. He is the best on Intel. It was a mixed Thursday here with the Dow higher, the S&P, NASDAQ both lower. Stocks, though, closing mostly lower after a report said that a leading experimental coronavirus drug made by Gilead performed poorly in a test. Gilead disputing that. Gilead shares lower today by 4.3%. Crude oil climbing back above $17 a barrel. Benchmark S&P 500 finishing in the red after whipsawing investors between gains and losses in the final few hours of trading. So here are the closing numbers. S&P down today, little changed, lower by a point at 27.97, a drop of less than 0.1%. The Dow held on to a 39-point gain, up by 0.2%. But to put that in context, have been up 409, up as much as 1.7%. NASDAQ fell by half a point. 10-year yield 0.59%. Gold up 1%, 17.32 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude surging $23 a barrel today. 23%, I should say, up $3.27 a barrel at 17.04. And again, to clarify, advancing today by 23.6% on West Texas Intermediate crude. One of the big questions confronting the nation is, when do we end the lockdown and when do we return to work? We caught up with Ron O'Hanley, CEO of Boston-based State Street, and he told us he's already dealt with that question in China.
How this plays out for us worldwide, we operate in 29 countries. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll be, we all knew when we had to leave. I don't think we're all going to know when it's okay to come back. And so we're thinking about a staged return and one that has employee safety at the top of the list.
Equinor, the oil company, today became the first major oil firm to cut its dividend amid a historic market rout. The move by Norway's biggest crude producer may be a signal of what's to come from others in the industry when they report earnings next week. Equinor today lower by 0.6% among some of the other oil majors today. ExxonMobil up by 3.1%. Chevron up 2.8%. ConocoPhillips higher today by 3.4%. Recapping equities mixed. S&P down a point, a drop there of less than 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. As Charlie mentioned, Intel out with their earnings after the closing bell. Stocks down roughly about 5%, a little bit more than 5% in the after hours. This is after the company topped earning estimates. It's not giving a full year guidance, but let's get into it with our own Anand Srinivasan, senior semiconductor and hardware analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. He's on the phone from New Jersey. Anand, good to hear you and have you with us again. Intel, what do you make? of the quarter and the look ahead?
I thought first quarter was great. I think that was, but nobody cares about what's already happened, right? People are looking ahead. And 2Q, there is some weakness with respect to gross margin and operating margin. So the question is that coming from disruption from a cost perspective, that they couldn't operate their fabs at full capacity, and as a result, they had some underutilization charges? Or is AMD making such a move that they have to cut pricing, and that is what is affecting gross margin? So that's one part of the story, and that effectively, if you take gross margins down 5 percentage points, that effectively takes you to the new earnings per share that they put out. Now, the longer-term question for 2020, or the intermediate term, is what happens in the second half. Now, they've always posited that this particular year is going to be a little lopsided, and that first half is going to be stronger than the second half. And the fact that they're continuing to say that, plus they've taken 2020 guidance off the table from a sales perspective, is introducing a little bit more uncertainty into the equation vis-a-vis the second half. And I think that is driving jitters in the stock being down 5%. So I don't think that anybody has any more visibility than anybody else with respect to, maybe even one quarter out. But the fact that they have cemented that view, I think, is leading to some jitters in the stock for sure.
Yeah, it feels like one of those things where you kind of knew that they were going to say it, because we were talking about this yesterday and on this notion of why would a company give guidance at this point? It's like, I mean, especially at this point where everybody's withholding it, you would sort of, you would look a little silly if you're like, no, we're pretty sure that this is going to happen.
What do you know that we don't know?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, do we have any sense, a level down yet, or maybe we need to wait for a little more color from them about the demand picture globally and sort of different pockets? Because we know that this virus, while ravaging the world, is playing out differently in different parts of the world.
Yeah, so there's several assumptions baked into this, right? So one of the things is they've said this right all along when they put out initial 2020 guidance and 1Q guidance, is that the cloud demand is very strong, but that group tends to be bingy, right? And that was expected to last through the first half. Now, you could argue that an extended work-from-home scenario and a distributed workforce actually propels you to the cloud a little bit more aggressively.
Right.
And as a result, the tail on that demand maybe doesn't end in 2Q, maybe it ends in 3Q. That's what our internal scenario takes into account, by the way. We're a little bit more positive and optimistic on Intel than most of our peers on the street. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is we had already baked in weakness from corporate IT spending. We don't think that $1 into the cloud is potentially perhaps more than $1 away from corporate IT, right? It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul in complete context, but I think that there is going to be weaker corporate IT spending. There's going to be weaker PC buying. There's going to be weaker mobile data spend from a units perspective. There's going to be weaker IoT spending. So all of that is all true. But can data center strength sort of outweigh some of that, at least through Q3? So those are sort of the puts and takes. And remember, the reason why data center is important is because, it's a very large, concentrated customer base. It's a profitable customer base. But it's a smaller piece of revenue. So you have those puts and takes. Demand in the second half, we've taken it down pretty substantially, but we don't have a full picture yet, is the short answer.
Yeah, which is what we've seen from a lot of companies.
Yeah,
we just don't know the picture.
Always good to get your perspective. Yeah. It's one of those voices that is a very calming, leveling voice and gives us a good picture of what's to come, even at a time, as Intel emphasized, of great uncertainty. Anand Srinivasan, he looks after chips and networking here at Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us on the phone from New Jersey.
Yep, stock's down about 5.5% in the aftermarket. So we'll continue to monitor that analyst call, bring you out headlines. If you want to know more about Intel and their earnings, feel free to go to Bloomberg.com. Coming up, we're going to talk about professional sports, specifically the NFL. That's coming up in just a moment, right here on Bloomberg Radio.
Let's get out to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. He's got your world and national headlines.
All right, Jason. Well, some numbers here. Total reported coronavirus cases in the U.S. this week is up 3.1%, but that is below last week's 4.4% average. Cases increased 2.5% day to day, slowest pace in a month. So still up, but slowing. California, dark day.
The disease killed more people in the state of California in the last 24 hours than any previous 24 hours. We still have more positives in this state every day. So disease continues to spread, and we need to continue to spread the word of vigilance.
Yeah, Governor Gavin Newsom does say a decrease in hospitalizations and ICU admissions, which is good news as well. He spent time separating the state as it heads into a beautiful weather weekend. Separation, the key. He says if people go to the beach and aren't careful, he'll be reporting an increase in cases next week. New York's death rate has slowed. Hospitalizations remain relatively flat. Governor Andrew Cuomo says in the first antibody testing program, 13.9% of those who hadn't tested positive for the disease do have antibodies. At his news briefing today, he also took aim at Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
Senator Mitch McConnell goes out and he says maybe the states should declare bankruptcy. Okay? This is one of the really dumb ideas of all time.
He says although the case curve has flattened, it is still a critical time. House debating the stimulus plan, most members wearing masks. And you guys love lifestyle. The dairy industry says the home delivery milkman is making a comeback. The industry has suffered some severe losses, but say this could help them. A surge. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. I got milk.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis.
Okay, people, I've got the daily checklist. Who today has eaten dinner for breakfast? Tick. Started a chore you'll never finish? Tick. Done a conference call in your pajamas? Tick. Here's another for your list. BritBox. Streaming the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, and now Channel 4. All in one place and ad-free. So add BritBox to your list and get a 30-day free trial of the biggest box of British box sets. Search BritBox free trial. Tick. Biggest compared to other SVOD providers. Auto renews at $5.99 a month unless cancelled. T's and C's apply.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course, Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player.
active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one, not only.
Catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Hey, it's Jacoby here from Jalen and Jacoby, and after you watch The Last Dance on ESPN, which you're obviously going to do just like the rest of us stuck in our homes in quarantine, you can join Jalen Rose and I for Jalen and Jacoby, The After Show. And we will be joined by the director of the documentary series, Jason Eyre, to discuss each episode in detail. You can hear our After Show right here on ESPN Radio on Sunday nights after the episodes air, and they'll be available on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast feed.
Search Jalen and Jacoby to listen today.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
On Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Intel has withdrawn its full-year sales forecast, citing, quote, significant economic uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Intel shares now lower by 7% in extended trading. Stocks mostly lower this Thursday after a report said that a leading experimental coronavirus drug made by Gilead performed poorly in a test. Both Gilead and scientists involved dispute that. Today we did see Gilead shares decline by 4.3%. S&P 500 index fell 1 point, closing lower, spending much of the day higher though, but in the end a losing session. The Dow gained 39 points, the Dow up 0.2%, NASDAQ lower today by less than a point. So again, recapping on the S&P, down by a point, down less than 0.1%. 10-year yield 0.60%. Gold up 1% today, $17.31 the ounce. Crude oil surging 23% to $17 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, we turn now to the world of sports. Everything is different, as everything is in our lives. It seems, Carol, and that extends to the NFL draft, kicking off, as it were. Let's get into it. Let's understand what this means for football and what this means for athletes and maybe what it even means for us as fans. Noel LaMontagne is director and client relationship manager, for Verdant's Capital Advisors, joining us on the phone from Pennsylvania. All right, this is a big couple days, Noel. Good to have you with us.
I appreciate you all having me, and it's going to be probably the most exciting 3 days of sports that we've seen in the last
3 months or so, I'd imagine, for everybody.
So much pent-up demand because people just want to look at something that has to do with sports that's, not some like dopey game of horse that ESPN is showing or, reliving the glory days of Michael Jordan. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those things. What do we expect to see? I mean, this is a virtual draft. This had become this huge traveling circus. I heard it referred to earlier today. Now it's going to be virtual. What does that mean ultimately for how the draft will go and what we may see out of it?
Well, I think in today's day and age, especially as it relates to professional football, and there are some other sports that play into this, it's become such a fantasy football and fantasy sports-driven world that I think a lot of people are going to identify with this format more than maybe the more traditional format, simply because this is how so many people get together on a weekend before the season and put together their fantasy teams, whether it be baseball, basketball, or football. So I think to a lot of folks out there, it's going to speak directly to them, and obviously the fact that it's not a replay of something that's happened before, it's going to get a lot of viewership, and I think it might end up being the most popular or most viewed draft in NFL history.
Is it pivotal for the industry more broadly, or for sports more broadly, Noel, in terms of online platform versus being somewhere and, or watching it, traditional television or traditional cable? I'm curious about the longer term impact of all of this.
I think that and the NFL has been in professional sports regardless of your rooting interest, they've been the top dog for a while now. I think this is going to be their opportunity to prove that maybe an unexpected need to have to do things differently might end up being a silver lining or a success story that they're able to parlay into future drafts. This is going to allow them to present a format that maybe the MLB uses in the future, maybe the NBA uses in the future. We don't know. So I think that them being that lead dog in the sports industry, professional sports industry, they're going to be able to set the tone, and how successful they are, I think, is going to give a lot of people ideas and inspiration for how they conduct their business down the line.
All right, well, to extend your metaphor a little bit, the lead dog may be sort of limping into the season here. We don't know what pro football is going to look like. We don't know what college football is going to look like. We don't know whether there's going to be a